Half a day after Robin and Andy were rescued, the riders of Noria assembled at the rendezvous point designated by Nevriel. This mission wasn't taken lightly. The stronghold had mobilized nearly half its military force, more than 500 dwarf warriors in total, 400 Grade D apostles, 95 Grade C apostles, 8 Grade B apostles. It was a formidable army, more than enough to sweep through any known enemy in the territory of Noria. But even Nevriel remained uneasy. They weren't just fighting bandits or rogue beasts. This was a kobold nest. Kobold nests often house thousands of kobolds. While the base warriors were weak, their ranks escalated quickly. Kobold leaders, kobold mages, and most dangerous of all, draconic kobolds. The draconic ones started at rank 3, and the older ones could reach rank 5. If even a single rank 5 draconic kobold was lurking inside, this battle could become a massacre. Creatures of that level were unheard of in beginner territories. They were effectively world bosses, impossible to handle alone, and only defeatable through a raid composed of high-ranking apostles. If Robin's safe, there's no reason to throw away our lives on this, one of the rider captains, a Grade B apostle, voiced. Let's head back and call it a day. Many nodded in agreement. Had Robin still been held captive, they would have rushed in without hesitation. But the remaining prisoners? They weren't worth dying over. At least, not in their eyes. Under normal circumstances, I'd agree, Boreas interjected. But we swore an oath. The one who guided us here trusted us to rescue his friends, no matter the cost. We made that vow before the Earth Goddess herself. That's not something we can ignore. Nevriel backed him with a solemn nod. The grumbles of the dwarf captains grew louder. Standing silently among them was Thoram, the commander of the stronghold, a Grade A apostle, and the strongest warrior in all of Noria. All eyes turned to him. His decision would decide their fate. Thoram's expression was hard. If he turned his back on the oath, his men would live, but their faith in him would die. No one followed a commander who discarded his word so easily. Dwarves valued loyalty and honor. If he abandoned that, his leadership would crumble. But to charge forward was to gamble hundreds of lives. He remained silent until another voice rang out. We're going to rescue Colette and the others. Robin stepped forward, eyes burning with purpose. I owe that half-elf my life, he said. I won't sleep at night if I abandon the one who saved me. I'm a dwarf, not a goblin. I won't turn my back on those who made an oath to the Earth Goddess. He turned to face the gathered warriors. Tell me, are you dwarves? Or goblins who flee when danger comes? The kingdom of Guellivan has no use for cowards. I'm going, even if I go alone. Andy and Helen stepped beside him, weapons in hand, resolute. A heavy silence hung in the air. Then Thoram knelt. I, Thoram, son of Malram of Thordrum, swear upon my axe and the Earth Goddess. Our path is to victory. We will fight. One by one, the riders of Noria dropped to one knee, weapons pounding the earth in unified resolve. Robin placed a hand on Thoram's shoulder. Then let's fight for victory. For Guellivan. For Guellivan, the warriors roared. With thunderous determination, the 500-strong battalion advanced toward the kobold nest, ready to fulfill their oath and save the comrades who still fought to survive. Inside the kobold nest. Shit! Lux cursed, gripping his weapon tight. Beside him, the captured dwarves braced themselves, eyes wide as the sounds of digging grew louder around them. The kobolds had discovered their missing scouts hadn't returned. In response, the kobold chieftain sent 100 troops, led by a mage and 4 leaders, to investigate. When they arrived, a fierce battle broke out. 70 managed to retreat and report back. Now the kobold sorcerer, leader of the mages, had taken command of the army. Instead of charging through the narrow passage, the kobolds began tunneling through the rock, mining, just as Lux feared they would. Thousands worked feverishly, carving new paths to surround the dump site. Others waited at the original tunnel, ready to strike. 3 hours passed in tense silence. Then the digging stopped. The mining has stopped, Lux whispered. They're up to something. Everyone, brace yourselves. Diablo and the skeletal fighters raised their shields, forming a barrier. Ishtar stood at the main tunnel, bow drawn, eyes narrowed. A moment later, boom, an explosion tore through the wall ahead. A fireball had detonated it, kobold sorcerer magic. As the dust cleared, a gaping hole was revealed, and through it came the war cries of 100 kobolds. The charge began. Diablo and the undead fighters held the breach, cutting down the first wave of kobolds. Though they were outnumbered, Diablo's upgraded strength, now rivaling a peak rank 3 monster, made him a one-man wall of death. But the pressure mounted. At the tunnel entrance, Ishtar's arrows slowed the flank, freezing kobolds in their tracks. It bought time, but not forever. Lux's jaw clenched. "This is it," he shouted. "Positions. If they break through, it's over. Fight like your lives depend on it, because they do." "Yes," the dwarves roared. As battle erupted within the caverns, far above, the riders of Noria had just eliminated the kobold sentries guarding the entrance. With Thoram at the lead, over 500 dwarves surged into the depths of the kobold nest, toward a battle that would shake the foundations of Noria itself. A clash of fight! Lux roared, his voice echoing through the cavern as he activated Battle Cry. A surge of magic burst from him like a ripple, empowering his allies with plus 100 to both physical and magical attack. With this powerful buff, even his standard skeletal fighters now struck with the strength of rank 2 creatures, enough to stop the tide, if only for a moment. Diablo and 5 skeletal fighters held a newly carved breach created by the kobolds. Meanwhile, Ishtar and 2 more undead warriors guarded the original narrow tunnel, where enemy forces were attempting a pincer maneuver. In the chaos, the non-combatants fell back, huddling in the rear of the cavern. Those who could fight stayed behind the skeletal front line, ready to step in a moment the undead fell. Among them stood Colette. She gripped her mace tightly, knuckles white. Though trained as a paladin and heir to the Golden Slayer clan, her body trembled. She knew firsthand how relentless the kobolds were, beasts that fought like a living swarm, sacrificing their own for every inch gained. Then, a warm hand gripped her shoulder. "Scared?" Lux asked gently, a small, understanding smile on his lips. Colette bit her lower lip. Her father had always said a paladin must never show fear. And yet, here she was shaking. Lux didn't press her. Instead, his hand moved from her shoulder to the top of her head. "I'm scared too," he said quietly, eyes fixed on the front lines, where his undead were locked in a brutal clash. "But I have a reason to stand and fight, even if my heart trembles." One of the skeletal fighters burst into bone fragments, and Lux instantly raised his hand to summon another. "I fight because I have someone waiting for me, someone who raised me, someone I want to return to. If I fall here, I'll break her heart, so I won't die. I can't." He summoned another fighter, then another. Steady, resolute. To Colette, he looked like a pillar, scarred by fear but unbroken by it. "What's your goal, big brother?" she asked softly, her fear momentarily forgotten. Lux gave her head a light pat. "To save a dying world from falling into ruin again," he said, "and to make sure it doesn't happen a second time." He stepped forward, summoning yet another skeletal fighter to plug a gap in the defense. "That's why I asked you all to fight beside me. Trust me. Stand with me. We will make it out. I swear to lead you back to the surface." He raised his voice so all could hear. "So rise, children of the Earth Goddess, stand, and carve a path to victory." Another skeletal fighter collapsed. Lux didn't hesitate. He charged in himself, blade flashing as he joined the front lines alongside Diablo and Colette. Colette's fear burned away under a rush of newfound courage. She raised her mace high and ran to his side, activating her paladin aura. Her divine energy spread outwards, strengthening the dwarves who surged to fill the ranks. "Diablo, push them back. Show these lizards who's boss," Lux shouted. Diablo's burning eyes narrowed with glee as he slammed his shield into a kobold, then unleashed Whirlwind Slash, a sweeping, deadly arc that tore through the enemy lines. Kobolds were thrown backward in mangled heaps, momentarily halting their advance under the undead's crushing pressure. Kakik, Diablo laughed, amused by the stunned silence of his foes. As a rank 3 monster wielding a weapon fit for legends, he had little reason to fear the lowly creatures before him. And his weapon, Blood Moon, was a myth among myths. Blood Moon. Weapon type, one-handed sword. Rarity, mythical. Damage, 225 to 350. Requirements, all stats greater than or equal to 50. Special wielder requirement, must be recognized by Randolph. Passive skills, Sharp Blade, never dulls. Swift Blade, feels weightless, allows rapid successive strikes. Lifesteal, recovers 10% of dealt damage. Bleed, 5% chance per strike to cause target to bleed. 1% max HP every 2 seconds for 10 seconds. Indestructible, cannot be destroyed. Diablo's defense was so high that most kobold attacks barely scratched him. And with each slash, lifesteal restored what little health he lost. Even in the midst of 100 rank 1 foes, a single whirlwind slash was enough to restore him to full. But the kobold sorcerer had seen enough. From the rear, it raised its staff and fired a blazing fireball toward the defenders. Unlike the foot soldiers, this one was a rank 3 elite, nearly rank 4, and not to be taken lightly. Diablo reacted immediately, hurling his bone spear to intercept. The two spells met midair and exploded, the blast shaking the cavern. Kakik, Diablo grinned, raising his sword and taunting the sorcerer from across the battlefield. The sorcerer scowled and retaliated, flinging fireball after fireball in rage. Diablo met every blast with a bone spear. Their duel lit the cavern with thunderous blasts, the shockwaves threatening to bring the cave down on everyone inside. Lux's eyes narrowed. He yanked Colette back, shielding her with his body as the ceiling trembled and dust fell like rain. The walls groaned. Then came the collapse. The unstable tunnel the kobolds had mined caved in completely. Dust and rubble flooded the corridor, sealing off the passage with a resounding crash. When the air cleared, the kobold advance had been completely halted. Diablo turned back, gave Lux a thumbs up, and struck a confident pose. He couldn't speak, but somehow the gesture clearly said, "Just as planned." Lux couldn't help but smirk. The smugness in Diablo's aura was unmistakable. For a moment, Lux even wondered, could he learn to talk someday? But there was no time to linger on the thought. He raised his hand and began summoning more skeletal fighters. The battle wasn't over. Not yet. Not until they all made it out alive.
Hey, welcome to Firescale Audiobooks. If you enjoy our audiobooks, please consider subscribing to the channel. Also, feel free to share your review in the comments section below.
Due to the battle happening at the lower layers of the kobold's nest, Lux had no idea that the reinforcements he had been waiting for had already arrived. Led by Thoram, the commander of Noria, the dwarf warriors used brute force to blast their way through the kobolds, which had detected their advance. After the incident of the others' escape, the nest was on high alert, so the kobolds immediately noticed the arrival of the uninvited guests in their domain. The kobold chieftain frowned after hearing his subordinates report. Right now, their strongest warrior, the kobold champion, was currently leading their main force to subdue the goblins that had built a large settlement near their territory. It would take their reinforcements a full day before they could return to the nest, so the chieftain was contemplating his choices about what they could do for the time being. Just like the kobold sorcerer, the kobold chieftain was at the peak of a rank 3 monster. Their champion, the draconic kobold, was at the peak of rank 4 and was only a step away from breaking through to rank 5. The other draconic kobolds, which ranged from rank 3 and rank 4, had accompanied him to battle, leaving only the kobold chieftain and the kobold sorcerer to look after the nest. Because of this, only 7,000 kobolds remained inside the nest. Although kobolds weren't afraid to fight to the death, they still didn't like meaningless deaths. After knowing the strength of their opponents, the kobold chieftain estimated that they wouldn't be able to beat the dwarf warriors who had come to raid them. Since that was the case, he decided to personally handle the issue and came out to have a dialogue with the invaders. Thoram and his men Brute forced their way against a horde of kobolds. Although the majority of them were rank 1, there were dozens of rank 2 kobolds mixed within their group. The battle was bloody as both sides fought tooth and nail against each other. After 2 hours of nonstop battle, blood dyed the ground, making Helen's expression very pale. Although the dwarves were stronger, they still lost over 100 men as over 1,000 kobolds fought them with a ferocity that made even the most arrogant of dwarves feel respect towards their enemies. After the battle ended, Thoram and the dwarves took a short rest as they tended to their injured. They knew that there would be more battles up ahead, so they decided to recuperate for a short period of time before continuing their rescue mission. An hour later, they once again formed their ranks and braced themselves for another hard battle. Thoram and his men noticed that the kobold nest was surprisingly empty after they explored the middle levels of the nest. They didn't know that the kobold chieftain had issued a command for all the kobolds to retreat to the lower levels, in order to prevent them from dying needlessly. Word had also been sent to the kobold sorcerer about the new threat, so they decided to pull their forces, which were currently raiding the dump site, to regroup with their secondary force. Just as the warriors of Noria arrived near the end of the kobold nest's middle level, they noticed 7 kobolds standing in a spacious cavern, as if waiting for their arrival. None of the kobolds were carrying any weapons, but they did hold wooden sticks with a white cloth tied to them. Thoram frowned, but he made a gesture for his men to not do anything reckless. After seeing their reaction, the kobold chieftain briefly nodded its head and spoke using the universal language of the realm. "What is your reason for coming here, dwarves?" the kobold chieftain asked. Thoram took a step forward as he faced the kobold's chieftain's indifferent expression. "You terrorize our lands and capture our people, yet you still dare to ask why we've come?" The kobold chieftain's expression remained calm as he eyed the dwarf who seemed to be the leader of the raiding party. "Dwarves kill us kobolds and steal the treasures we mine underground," the kobold chieftain stated. "Naturally, we kill them back. It has always been like this, and will always be in the future." This time, it was Thoram's turn to frown. To the dwarves, the kobolds were a race that liked to mine. Although dwarves liked to mine themselves, their passion didn't come close to what the kobolds felt about mining. There were times when these two races met underground while they were creating mazes in the depths of the earth. Wars between them were very common, and Thoram would not lower his dignity to refute the kobold chieftain's words. Since that was the case, he decided to get to the point and see whether both he and the kobold chieftain could reach a compromise. "We've only come here to rescue our people," Thoram declared. "If you give them to us and promise to not attack any more dwarves in the territory of Noria, we can have a non-aggression pact between our parties." "Do you have the qualifications to make this pact hold true?" the kobold chieftain asked. Right now, their priority was to wage war on the other monsters in the area in order to secure the safety of their nest. Also, they were patiently waiting for their draconic champion to evolve into a rank 5 monster. Once that happened, there would be very few creatures that could threaten their existence in the territory of Noria. "I am Thoram, the commander of the stronghold of Noria," Thoram replied. "This territory is under my jurisdiction, so yes, I have the authority to make this pact binding." Thoram didn't want to lose any more of their men in a fight against the kobolds because they had more pressing issues at hand. The beast tide season was nearing, and they would need every dwarf fighter to protect the walls of Noria from the beast invasion. They simply didn't have time to deal with the kobolds at this point. If the stronghold of Noria could form a non-aggression pact with them, that meant that they could focus all of their attention in other areas that required their assistance. "Very well," the kobold chieftain nodded. Since both sides didn't want to wage a full-blown war against each other, a compromise was a welcome topic between the two forces. "Make an oath to your earth goddess," the kobold chieftain stated. "And you make an oath to the dragon king," Thoram countered. To the dwarves, the oath to the earth goddess was a sacred oath. Although the dragon king was not a god, for kobolds, it was the ultimate existence they would offer everything to, even their lives. After the two sides made their oaths, the kobold chieftain asked one of his elite warriors to escort Thoram and his subordinates to the lower layers, where Lux and the other dwarves had holed themselves in. Lux and the other dwarves were in a state of tension as they waited for the kobolds to continue their attacks. The half-elf didn't know why the kobolds' relentless assault had suddenly stopped, so he merely advised everyone to be on their guard. 2 hours later, the half-elf heard some noises that seemed to be heading towards their direction. When the half-elf stood up and went towards the exit, all the dwarves prepared themselves to fight once again. However, before they could even raise their fighting spirit, Helen's voice echoed down the tunnel. "Big brother, Colette, Maddie, Axel, are you guys all right?" Helen shouted as soon as she appeared in the narrow tunnel leading to the dump site. Helen, Lux couldn't believe that the little dwarf girl would appear on the lower floors of the kobold nest looking practically unharmed. "What are you doing here?" "We've come to rescue everyone," Helen shouted as she ran towards the opening of the cavern and hugged Colette. The red-headed teenager glanced down the tunnel and saw several dwarves wearing armor. Clearly, these were the reinforcements they had been waiting for. However, he felt that something was off. "Helen, did you meet any kobold along the way?" Lux asked. The kobold chieftain came to negotiate with the commander," Helen answered. "We now have a non-aggression pact with the kobolds. We can all leave this place safely." When Lux and the dwarves heard Helen's words, most of them didn't believe it at the start, but after seeing that no kobolds were attacking the dwarves, they finally understood why the attack on their location had stopped. Lux breathed in a sigh of relief after confirming that Helen's words were true, although he kept on showing a confident expression on his face to prevent Colette and the other dwarves from panicking. Deep inside, he was standing on pins and needles. After losing the tension in his body, his legs buckled, and he almost collapsed on the ground. Fortunately, Diablo was standing beside him and managed to support him in time. "Big brother, what's this? Getting soft all of a sudden?" Colette teased. Now that they had been saved, the little girl's cheekiness had returned. The half-elf only chuckled and ruffled Colette's hair in order to get back at her. "Let's go back to Leaf Village," Lux said softly. "I want to take a long, nice rest and a few days off from adventures." Colette and the other dwarves felt the same way. With the protection of the warriors of Noria, all of them left the kobold's nest safely. Though Ram had sent 50 of his men to accompany Lux, Colette, and the rest of her party to escort them back to Leaf Village. Along the way, Nevriel and Lux had a private talk. The middle-aged dwarf had directly asked the half-elf what kind of reward he wanted for his help in guiding them to the kobold's nest, where Robin was held captive. Lux didn't plan to play the goody-two-shoes and reject the free rewards that were being offered to him. "I want weapons and armor," Lux stated. "The higher the quality, the better. Of course, if you plan to give me a mythical weapon, I will gladly accept it with open arms." Nevriel stared at Lux with a hawk-like gaze before leaving the half-elf side. The red-headed teenager watched him go with a smile on his face. He was just teasing the middle-aged dwarf about the mythical weapon, but he wasn't lying when he said that he wanted weapons and armor. His summon minions had gained the equip item skill, which meant that they could equip weapons, armor, accessories, and other miscellaneous items. If Lux could arm all of them to the teeth, then the forces he could wield would not lose to a dwarf party who had broken through the apostle rank. The swishing sound of a broom could be faintly heard in the surrounding area as Vera gathered the leaves that had fallen in front of their house. She had been doing this almost every single day ever since Lux left because she had nothing else to do. After gathering the leaves into a pile, she took them to a part of the garden where she used them as mulch for other plants. After finishing her task, she went back inside the house and headed to Lux's room. Upon entering, she scanned the surroundings to see if there was anything amiss. Seeing nothing out of place, she waved her hand and used cleaning magic to clean it. A gentle breeze swept across the room, leaving a refreshing fragrance behind. Vera made sure to clean her grandson's room every day, using magic to ensure that Lux's stay would be a comfortable one if ever he came back home to rest. She nodded her head in satisfaction once the cleaning spell ended. Just as she was about to leave, her gaze landed on a rainbow ball that sat on top of Lux's desk. It was something that she had bought from a passing merchant when Lux was only 2 years old. After picking up the ball, a nostalgic smile appeared on Vera's face as she remembered her adopted grandson's hardship when he was only 2 years old. 2 years after Vera saved Lux from the giant crocodiles. Good morning, Grandma Vera. Good morning, Lux. Are the two of you going out for a walk? Lux is growing up fast. It was just like yesterday when you adopted him as your grandson. After a few more years, he will definitely be a handsome boy. Vera smiled as she chatted with the residents of Wildguard Stronghold. Lux was a special existence within the stronghold, not because he was a half-elf, but because he was Vera's adopted grandson. The stronghold had 9 protectors, which ensured that it remained the overlord of the territory. There have been many occasions when the local and foreign warlords tried to invade the fortress in order to expand their domains. However, all of their ambitions were turned to ashes after these 9 protectors made their move. Vera was one of those protectors, so her status in Wildguard Stronghold was very high. As someone who their protector had adopted, Lux became a hot topic among the residents. Lux, who was being carried by Vera in her arms, sucked his thumb as he curiously eyed his surroundings. Whenever someone tried to lightly rub his cheeks, he would cry. Even if a beautiful girl kissed him, he would still cry. If someone attempted to talk to him, he would cry as well. This made Vera feel very helpless. Her grandson didn't like to be touched, kissed, or talked to by other people at all. As Vera neared the vast playground, where most of the children in the stronghold gathered, the thumb-sucking baby in her arms raised his head and looked at the children with great interest. His grandma would often bring him here to watch the other children play. But today was different. Vera took him to the playground so that he could interact with children of his age. As the old lady walked towards the left side of the playground, where a group of toddlers could be found, several of the ladies who had gathered there to look after their children stood up and gave her a brief bow. Vera waved her hand to put them at ease before placing Lux down on the ground. As a 2-year-old, Lux was able to stand up on his own, but most of the time, he still preferred to crawl on all fours to get to where he wanted. Lux, play with the other kids, Vera said as she coaxed her grandson to go where the other children were playing. The toddler's area had a special protection magic around it that ensured that nothing dangerous would happen to any of the children. Vera had only taken a few steps away when she saw Lux following behind her. When she stopped, Lux grabbed hold of her leg and laughed. This made the ladies who had been watching over their children giggle. They had seen Lux several times in the past, but he was mostly carried along by Vera whenever she walked around the stronghold for her regular patrol. Seeing the little half-elf follow his grandma around like a little duckling made the hearts of the ladies melt. They couldn't help but think about how endearing he was. Lux, don't you want to play with the other kids? Vera asked. Look, they're having fun over there. Vera pointed at a bunch of 2 to 4-year-old kids playing with colorful balls and small boxes that littered the playing area. Lux glanced at the place where Vera was pointing at and started to suck on his thumb once again. Seeing that an opportunity had arrived, the old lady lightly pried Lux's left hand, which was still clinging at her leg off, and jumped to the top of a tree where Lux wouldn't be able to see her. Since Lux was still a baby, he didn't notice right away that his grandma had disappeared from beside him. The moment he turned his head to look back, Vera was no longer in sight. The little half-elf turned his head in every way, searching his surroundings, trying to find his grandma. A minute later, when Lux still couldn't find Vera, he started crying, calling out to his grandma. Mama, wah-ah, mama. A/N. Mama is mama and grandma combined. The little half-elf was bawling his eyes out, making the ladies who were watching him earlier get a strong urge to hug and coax him until he no longer cried. However, they didn't dare move from their location because they knew that Vera was just up in the tree beside her grandson, observing his every move. Mama, mama. Lux cried and called out repeatedly until his face became flushed. Anyone who saw him right now would feel heartbroken because of how pitiful he looked. Vera sighed because she realized that Lux might not be ready yet to play with the other children. Just as she was about to jump off the tree, Lux suddenly collapsed and laid on the ground without moving. The ladies who saw what happened cried out in alarm and stood from their seats. They were about to go and help Lux when Vera appeared by his side. The old lady picked up her grandson and immediately checked his condition with a spell. The result baffled Vera because, according to her medical knowledge, Lux was perfectly fine. The old lady then wiped the tears and snot on her grandson's face before leaving the scene to visit her friend, who was Wildguard Stronghold's healer. She was not a medical expert, so she decided to let her friend do a full diagnostic check on her grandson to find out what had happened. He's not in any serious danger. At least for now, the strongest cleric in Wildguard Stronghold, Natasha, said with a frown. There's nothing wrong with his body. But do you remember what I told you when you brought him to me after you returned to the stronghold with him? Vera nodded. You said that he might have been exposed to a soul-damaging spell, which may leave him with some problems growing up. Yes, Natasha stated. Back then, he was still too young, so these problems weren't obviously showing. Now it's different. This is a side effect of his soul being damaged. Although it is too early to tell, I have a feeling that he will lose consciousness anytime he is faced with very strenuous situations. Worst case scenario, it might be triggered when he experiences any kind of strong emotions like happiness, anger, sadness, or depression. Vera looked at her grandson with an anxious expression before looking back at her friend, who was still in the middle of casting a diagnostic spell. Is there any way to cure him? Vera asked. Just tell me what things you need. I'll get them for you. Natasha sighed and shook her head. This is beyond my capabilities. I've already tried to use my powers, and even gave him a very strong elixir a year ago. I thought that it would help his soul heal over time, but it didn't work. Then what should I do? Don't let him feel any stress or encounter stressful situations. Bring him to me for regular checkups so I can observe his condition all the time. Maybe, just maybe, we will be able to figure out a way to rid him of this sickness before he becomes old enough to enter Elysium. After leaving her friend's house, Vera carried her grandson back to their residence. When she was halfway through their journey, Lux opened his eyes and looked drowsily at Vera. After seeing that his grandma was in front of him, he hurriedly wrapped his arms around her neck and once again started to cry. Clearly, the little half-elf had been scared silly earlier and still hadn't gotten over the fact that Vera had disappeared without him noticing. There, don't cry, Vera coaxed as she lightly patted Lux's back. Don't worry, Grandma will not leave you again, okay? So stop crying. It took Vera a full 5 minutes to coax Lux enough to get him to stop crying. It was at this moment when she passed by a merchant stall in which several items were laid out for sale. In order to apologize to her grandson, Vera bought the rainbow color ball from the merchant and gave it to Lux to play with. Surprisingly, the little half-elf loved Vera's gift and played with it a lot. There were even times when he would faint while playing with the ball due to how excited he was, which had made Vera panic several times because of how sudden it was. Time flies so fast, Vera muttered as she lovingly placed the ball back on top of the desk. She missed the days when Lux was still young, but she also understood that he couldn't remain a child forever. This was why, when Lux decided to go to Elysium, she had given him her silent consent and passed her family's special techniques to him. Vera hoped that it would be enough to keep Lux safe when he faced dangerous situations. Just as she was wondering what to cook for lunch, she felt a fluctuation inside the house. Vera didn't hesitate and ran towards the training room. The moment she opened the door, a handsome half-elf with red hair and eyes as green as emeralds turned his head to look at her. I'm back, Grandma, Lux said with a smile. I missed you. The old lady walked towards her grandson and hugged him tightly. It had been more than a month since Lux had come to Elysium, so she had also missed him terribly. Welcome back, Lux, Vera replied as she lightly ruffled her grandson's head like usual. Your hair has grown a bit long. Do you want me to cut it for you? Is it that long already? Lux asked as he scratched his head. Yes, Vera answered with a smile. But we can do that later. Have you eaten? What do you want to eat for lunch? That day, Vera cooked all of Lux's favorite dishes. The half-elf ate a lot because it was tasty and he had missed his grandma's cooking. After the meal, Lux told Vera about his adventures in Elysium. Vera smiled as she listened to her grandson's bragging. She found it funny when Lux told her that he single-handedly fought a kobold's nest. As someone that had fought these monsters in the past, how could she possibly believe her grandson's exaggerated tale? Well, as long as he is safe, that is all that matters, Vera thought as she praised Lux for his amazing performance. They had been finally reunited after more than a month of parting, so Vera had no intention of ruining Lux's good mood, and allowed him to brag as much as he wanted. While the grandma and grandson pair were spending some quality time together, news of what happened in the kobold's nest had reached the ears of the high-ranking personages in the kingdom of Guelvin. By the time that the half-elf returned to Leaf Village to continue his adventures, he would understand that the dwarf race was not a race that should be taken lightly. "I'm going now, Grandma," Lux said as he hugged Vera. "I'll come and visit as often as I can." Vera hummed as she lightly patted her adopted grandson's head. "I'll always be here waiting. Be safe, Lux." The red-headed teenager reluctantly took a step back as he looked at his grandma's gaze, filled with affection. It was the face that had watched over him all these years and showered him with love and tenderness. In his past lifetime, Lux had no goals in life. This time around, he had two goals in mind. The first one was to help save the world from destruction, and the second goal was to make his grandma proud of him. He wanted her to know that all the sacrifices she had made for him all these years were worth it. More than anything else, he wanted the world to give Vera the recognition she deserved. And for that to happen, he must return to Elysium, back to the world that held the secrets on how Solais could be saved from its predetermined destruction. "Take care, Grandma. I love you," Lux said as he pressed his fist over his chest. "Open Heaven's Gate." Lux turned into particles of light and disappeared. Vera smiled as she placed a hand over her chest. She was very happy that her grandson was doing well in Elysium. She knew that this parting wouldn't last forever, for in time, the little half-elf, who she had raised since he was a baby, would return to her side once more after he grew tired from his adventures. Leaf Village. After returning to Leaf Village, the first thing that Lux did was to visit his blacksmith master, Randolph. He had already returned Blood Moon to his master's custody because the mission had ended. However, Lux was thinking if he could borrow it again for a short period of time to accomplish a great undertaking for the village. Although he didn't want to rely on a mythical weapon for help, the mission he planned to accomplish was impossible to complete without it. However, just as Lux entered the business district of the village, several familiar faces ran towards him with smiles on their faces. "Big brother," Colette called out as she happily jumped at him with her arms open wide. The half-elf had no choice but to catch the adorable little girl who seemed to have become more lively after spending a few days back home. After the battle in the kobold's nest, Colette and her friends returned to Solais in order to see their families. This was a very natural custom for dwarves, especially after managing to survive a near-death experience. After swinging the little dwarf round and round a few times, Lux placed her back on the ground and lightly patted her head. Colette, on the other hand, grabbed hold of Lux's hands and held it firmly in her two little hands. "Big brother, I have thought about this for a long time. You have risked your life a few times to save me, and for that I am very grateful," Colette said with a serious expression on her face. "That's why, in order to repay you, will you please marry?" Lux gulped because Colette was looking at him with a flushed expression on her face. The half-elf waited with bated breath as the little dwarf finished what she wanted to say. Maddie, who was watching this scene, immediately became alarmed. He then gave Lux the "I'm going to kill you if you marry Colette" glare, which made the red-headed teenager have a strong urge to slap him. "Will you please marry my big sister?" Colette pleaded. "That way, you will be part of our family." Maddie, who was about to draw his sword, ready to hack Lux into pieces, stopped midway. He then looked at Colette and patted his chest in relief before glaring back at Lux, who had a dumbfounded expression on his face. "Marry your big sister?" Lux blinked once then twice in confusion. "Yes." Colette nodded her head. "My big sister is very beautiful. She has many suitors, but if I help you, your chances of marrying her will be very high. Don't worry, even if you're not a dwarf, I will vouch for you." Lux wanted to scratch his head using his left hand, since his right was firmly held by the excited little dwarf who was looking up at him with sparkling eyes. "I'll think about it," Lux replied in helplessness. He felt that if he rejected Colette's offer right away, the little girl would throw a tantrum and pester him until he said yes. "Good." Colette smiled. For now, she was satisfied with Lux's answer. After going back home, She had told her parents and her sister about how Lux had saved them inside the kobold's nest. Colette's parents and older sister were quite surprised because they understood how difficult it was to fight against a horde of kobolds inside their nest. Because of this, the little girl's father even prepared several gifts to repay Lux for saving his daughter's life. "Big brother, this is for you. This came from my family. It's a thank you gift for saving our lives." Colette procured a silver ring from her magic bag and gave it to Lux. "Please accept it." Lux didn't stand on ceremony and accepted the silver ring from Colette's hands. Right now, he wouldn't reject any goodwill that would help him become stronger in Elysium. When the half-elf glanced at the contents of the ring, he found 20 rank 2 beast cores and a blue bow with intricate designs. Out of curiosity, Lux took out the bow from the storage ring to give it a closer look. "It's a good bow," Lux said as he held it in his hands. Right now, he didn't have the ability to appraise things because he still hadn't learned the skill yet, but it was not a problem because he had the Elysium Compendium. Any item that could be found in Elysium was recorded inside the mythical item that Lux had acquired through Gacha. After summoning the compendium in his hand, the information for the bow appeared, and Lux wasn't able to stop himself from whistling after reading its contents. Heart Striker, Bow of the Forest. Weapon type, longbow. Rarity, unique. Requirement, dexterity 80. Damage, 125 to 160. Increase range attack damage by 20%. Passive skill, shot to the heart. Shot to the heart. Deals double damage if your attack hits the heart area of your target. This ability works with normal and skill-based attacks. "Thank you, Colette," Lux said with a smile. "This is just the thing that I need." "I'm glad you liked it, big brother." Colette smiled back. She was quite happy that Lux liked the gift that her father had prepared for him. Although she hadn't seen Lux use a bow before, she believed that since her big brother was a half-elf, he was blessed with the ability to use a bow perfectly. What the cute little dwarf didn't know was that the reason why Lux was happy was because he was looking for a weapon to give to his skeleton hunter, Ishtar. With Heartstriker in her possession, her long-range attacks would be even more deadly. Maddie, Helen, Axel, and Andy also gave Lux various gifts that came from their family. Although they didn't present Lux with any weapons, all of them gave him 10 rank 2 beast cores, which made the half-elf very happy. "Are you angels?" Lux asked as he accepted the beast cores with gratitude. "The last time I checked, today is not my birthday." "Huh? Did the kobolds clobber your head on our return trip?" Maddie snorted. "This is just our family being grateful to you for saving our lives. Mark my word, this won't happen ever again. I will never, ever be placed in a situation again where someone else needs to rescue me." Colette, Helen, Axel, and Andy all nodded their heads in agreement. Their experience inside the kobold's nest wasn't a good one. Because of this experience, they wanted to become stronger. The next time a similar situation happened, they wouldn't be as helpless as they had been previously. Lux could understand what they were feeling because he also thought the same. As long as he could become stronger than his enemies, then he wouldn't have to worry about being placed into a dangerous position. "Big brother, what are your plans for today?" Colette asked. "We plan to look for the carbuncle in the aspiration plains. Would you like to join us?" "Carbuncle?" Lux frowned as he returned the bow to his storage ring. The carbuncle was the alpha beast of the aspiration plains. It was the lord of the horned rabbits and a support-type monster that healed and buffed its allies in battle. Of course, when put to a pinch, this meter-tall beast was capable of attacking its enemies with physical and magical attacks. It was also very fast, which made it a difficult adversary for a party whose members still hadn't stepped into the apostle rank. The reason why Colette proposed to attack the carbuncle was due to Lux's performance in the kobold's nest. After seeing Diablo's strength, as well as the other skeletons under the half-elf's command, she was very confident that they would be able to beat the weakest of the alpha beasts of Leaf Village. Colette's offer was very tempting, and Lux also knew that they were indeed capable of challenging the carbuncle. However, the plan he had in mind must take precedence. Now that the riders of Noria had a non-aggression pact with the kobolds, who had resorted to banditry in the past, their hands were now more free to handle some tasks that they had set aside beforehand. One of these tasks was dealing with the mosquito infestation that was still happening in the Figaro Gardens. Lux wanted to deal with this menace before the riders of Noria were dispatched to the scene. As long as he could borrow Blood Moon from his master, Randolph, again Lux was confident that his skeleton party would be able to decimate the mosquitoes that had forced the Adventurers Guild to prevent everyone from entering the Figaro Gardens. There is something that I need to do first, but I'll probably be back within 3 days, Lux replied after organizing his thoughts. If you can wait till then, I will be more than happy to challenge the carbuncle with all of you. Okay. Colette readily agreed to Lux's proposal. Let's fight the carbuncle in 3 days. This is a promise. Right, big brother? Lux nodded. I promise. I will return in 3 days and fight the carbuncle with all of you. Also, I won't fight with any of you for the monster drops. All of you can have it. Big brother, you are the best. Colette grinned as she gave Lux a thumbs up. After talking about a few more things, the group parted and went to deal with their own business. Lux resumed his journey to his master's workshop while time was still on his side. He hoped that before the riders of Noria arrived, he would be able to finish the task that he had set out to do. Your purpose is good, but can't you just wait until the riders of Noria handle this mission? Randolph, the blacksmith of Leaf Village, asked. Now that the kobolds are no longer a problem, it is only a matter of time before they resume handling the problems that they have set aside due to the kobolds' wanton banditry. It is exactly because of this reason that we should strike now, Master, Lux countered. Right now, there's so many monster materials that can be looted from the Figaro Gardens. Are we going to let the riders of Noria take them all? Randolph's expression eased up a bit, and Lux knew that he was faltering. All he needed to do was give his master one more push before the latter agreed to lend him Blood Moon for a few days. Well, I'm going to be honest. It does tempt me, but the answer is still no, Randolph replied as he crossed his arms over his chest. Listen, Lux, I don't want you to rely on the mythical weapon to boost your progress. Since you are my disciple, I want you to resume your studies of blacksmithing. I'm sure that after a few years, you will be able to craft mythical weapons. No, Master, Lux corrected. I won't settle for mythical weapons. I will go for legendary weapons. Randolph looked at Lux with a dumbfounded expression before roaring in laughter. Ha ha. Yes, you're right. Randolph patted Lux's shoulder in a good mood. As my disciple, you are bound to create legendary weapons. This is something I expect from the person I have chosen. Lux grinned because he was only just a step away from achieving his plan. Now that he had stroked Randolph's ego, it was now time to strike while the iron was hot. Master, I will be honest with you. I have a feeling that the mosquito's growth is suspicious, Lux said. There has been no record that such a thing has happened in the past. Something must be causing it, and the secret lies in the north end of the Figaro Garden. Randolph rubbed his chin because he couldn't refute Lux's hypothesis. Just as he said, there had been no incidences in the past where a mosquito swarm of such magnitude had appeared in the place where insectoid monsters roamed. Although the elders of the village looked calm on the surface, deep inside, they must be very worried. A mosquito monster outbreak wasn't a joke, and compared to the undead outbreak they had experienced not long ago, this one was potentially more dangerous. It was so dangerous that the houses which still didn't have basements that the residents could hide in had no choice but to cooperate with the earth mages of the village. These earth mages used their magic to dig an underground shelter to be used for an emergency, in the off chance that they didn't have time to go to the main shelter. Lux, I know that your main purpose in asking for Blood Moon is to take advantage of the situation, Randolph stated. However, as one of the elders of the village, I still have to consider the well-being of everyone that lives here. If I lend you Blood Moon for a few days, are you confident that you will be able to deal with the mosquito swarm? Lux smiled as he held up 2 fingers from his hand. Without Blood Moon, my chances to accomplish my goal is only 20%, Lux admitted. However, if I have Blood Moon, my chances will rise to 60%. Master, I think it is worth it to take a gamble. I know you have skeleton summons to handle the dangerous stuff for you, but can you assure your safety in this mission? I can. Lux patted his chest with confidence. He had no intention of dying in Elysium because he knew that his grandma would be sad. So more than anything else, he had always prioritized his safety above all others. This was why he wanted Randolph to lend him Blood Moon. It was to ensure that his mission would become a huge success. Very well, Randolph relented. I will lend you Blood Moon, but only for a few days. After you finish this expedition, you will not ask me to lend it to you ever again. Do I make myself clear? Lux nodded. Yes, master. The two talked about the details of how Lux would safely accomplish his mission. Hearing his plan made Randolph scratch his head in disbelief. He had thought that Lux had only planned a simple means to keep himself safe. So he was surprised to hear that his disciple also planned to hide in the underground tunnels of the ant nest to ensure that no mosquito would find him. After knowing that his sole disciple was truly going to play it safe, Randolph lent Blood Moon to Lux with peace of mind. As long as the half-elf wouldn't risk his life to fight against thousands of mosquitoes, the blacksmith of Leaf Village was willing to entrust him with the greatest creation that he had made in his lifetime. Ah, master, I need another favor from you, Lux said after receiving Blood Moon and re-equipping it in Diablo's equipment slot. There was one more important thing that he needed to do in order to maximize the rewards of his expedition. Well, as long as it's not unreasonable, I will think about it, Randolph replied. Since he had already agreed to lend the half-elf his weapon, a little favor wouldn't hurt. Lux smiled as he told his master the contents of his favor. After hearing his request, Randolph nodded his head in agreement. Now that his goal has been achieved, Lux made preparations to enter the Figaro garden under the cover of darkness. The mosquitoes were more active around this time, and Lux was sure to find them instantly. Looking at the beast cores that had been gifted to him by the parents of his friends, Lux planned to upgrade his skeleton party and have him attack the mosquitoes and collect as many Lux locked himself up inside his room in the inn and looked at the beast cores he had in his possession. From fighting with his life on the line in the kobold's nest, as well as the rewards that were given to him by the parents of Colette, Maddie, Helen, Axel, and Andy, the half-elf had acquired a good number of beast cores which would make his team a lot stronger. 151 rank 1 beast cores and 80 rank 2 beast cores. That was the total number of beast cores that Lux currently possessed, which made him feel giddy whenever he thought of it. I'll upgrade Ishtar and the skeleton archers for now, Lux muttered as he held a rank 2 beast core in his hand. Our opponents are flying creatures, so range attacks will be more effective than melee attacks. Lux then checked Ishtar's current rank as he applied 1 beast core after another. After using 20 rank 2 beast cores, Ishtar's rating went up from D+ to C, which upgraded her overall stats. She also learned the passive skill Hunter's Eye, which allowed Ishtar's to lock on a single target and attack it with greater accuracy from great distances. Lux spent an additional 27 rank 2 beast cores to raise her rating to C+, which allowed her to learn 2 active skills, namely Arrow Shower and Piercing Arrow. Arrow Shower, as the name suggested, allowed Ishtar to shoot a magical arrow where it would split into multiple arrows that would rain down on her enemies. This was a very effective AoE attack, especially when dealing with enemies that were grouped together. Piercing Arrow, on the other hand, was a skill that allowed Ishtar to fire a charged arrow that could pierce through armored units or monsters that had very tough skin like dragon scales, exoskeletons, etc. Of course, when certain arrows were paired up with the Piercing Arrow skill, their effectiveness would increase, turning them deadlier. For example, an adamantium arrow was an arrow that was strong enough to pierce through dragon scales. If Ishtar were to use the Piercing Arrow skill, alongside the adamantium arrow, the arrow would embed itself deeper inside the monster's body, causing greater damage. Ishtar, named Skeleton Hunter. Rating, C+. Mana, 10. Progress, 0/1,000. Health, 5,500/5,500. Mana, 2,550/2,550. Attack, 180 to 215, plus 160 Heart Striker. Attack type, range dice damage. Strength, 80. Intelligence, 85. Vitality, 80. Agility, 85. Dexterity, 115. Active skill, Hunter's Mark, Set Trap, Arrow Shower, Piercing Arrow. Passive skill, Equip Item, Hunter's Eye. Title, The Forgotten Queen. Note, sometimes I aim to please, but most of the time I aim to kill. Lux smiled after seeing Ishtar's character information in his soul book. After admiring her stats and skills for a minute, he then shifted his attention to his skeleton archers, whom he intended to upgrade until they matched the strength of his skeleton fighters. Let's go big time on this one. Lux smirked as he consumed all 151 rank 1 beast cores and turned them into 1510 skill points. Lux used 1,300 skill points and upgraded his skeleton archers 4 times, which made them evolve into skeleton grand archers. These upgraded skeleton archers had also acquired powerful skills like the crippling volley and Vulture's Eye, which gave Lux the confidence that he would be able to accomplish his goal without fail. Crippling volley. When 4 or more skeleton grand archers are together, they will be able to activate this unique ability that allows them to fire a volley of magical arrows that have a high chance to paralyze their enemies. Vulture's Eye allows the skeleton grand archer to see further by 200 meters. Summon Skeleton Grand Archer. Rating B. Mana, 10. Progress, 0/800. Summons 4 Skeleton Grand Archer to fight for you. Summon duration, 4 hour. Skill cooldown, 1 minute. Health points, 2,000. Attack, 100 to 150. Attack type, physical range damage. Active skills, triple shot, crippling volley. Passive skills, fast reload, Vulture's Eye. Just to be on the safe side, Lux used 17 rank 2 beast cores to upgrade Diablo once, making his vanguard even stronger. The Skeleton Rider was already his party's strongest melee unit. However, since Diablo was also the wielder of Blood Moon, Lux decided to strengthen him to make him more formidable in battle. Diablo, finally a worthy opponent. Our battle will be legendary. Named Skeleton. Skeleton Rider. Rating B+. Mana, 10. Progress, 10/800. Health, 10,500/10,500. Mana, 1,940/1,940. Attack, 280 to 335, plus 300 damage from Blood Moon. Attack type, ethereal damage. Strength, 98 plus 1. Intelligence, 97. Vitality, 96 plus 2. Agility, 97 plus 2. Dexterity, 97 plus 2. Defense, 83 plus 250 defense. Title, Firstborn, Squad Captain, Relentless Charger. Active skills, /heavy / bone spear, dual EX, whirlwind / leap. Passive skills, parry, tactician, improved dodge, union of man and beast, enhanced fortitude, intimidate new. Lux still had 220 skill points remaining, which he set aside for the time being so they could be used for future upgrades. Diablo had also learned the skill Intimidate, which struck fear in monsters that were equal or weaker than it in rank. Monsters affected by the Intimidate skill would have their attack speed and movement speed decreased by 30%. Diablo and Ishtar are now rank 2 monsters, while my other summons are at the middle stage of rank 1 monsters. Lux thought as he glanced at the information of all the creatures under his command. Back then, he thought that it would take him a long while to gather resources in order to fully upgrade his minions. Gathering beast cores was not an easy task, especially at the start when one was going solo. If not for the fact that he had been generously rewarded by Colette's parents at the beginning, as well as having the chance to take advantage of the Figaro Garden and Kobold Nest incidents, Lux would not have reached the stage he was in right now. Now that his minions had all evolved and became stronger, Lux was finally able to breathe a sigh of relief as he finally overcame the insecurity he'd felt over the past few years. For 4 years, he was barred entry to Elysium because of his weak body. Now, even though he had been left behind by his friends in Wildguard Stronghold, who had gone to the higher areas of Elysium, Lux no longer felt envious of them, for he knew that after just a year, he could catch up to them, and a year after that, he would surpass all of them. "Grandma, just wait for me," Lux said as she stood up to leave his room. "A few months from now, I will surprise everyone in Wildguard Stronghold. I will show them how awesome your grandson is." The half-elf left the inn with a serious expression on his face. His destination was the Figaro Garden, and he would not return until his storage bags, storage rings, and his enchanted beast ring were filled to the brim with resources that would make his master Randolph laugh until all of his teeth fell out of their sockets. The buzzing of mosquitoes could be heard in the darkness of the night. Ever since Lux had left to save Colette and the others, the numbers of mosquitoes had increased significantly. In fact, there were now so many of them that the ecosystem of the Figaro Garden was in danger of being overturned. The first thing that the half-elf did when he entered the garden was to look for the nearest ant nest where he could hide. The ants recognized Lux right away because he was the only half-elf that visited the garden, not to mention that he had become their business partner as well. After chatting with the ants for a bit in order to get a general situation of the garden, Lux immediately summoned his skeletons and put them to work. Diablo, along with 7 skeletal fighters, stood at the ready. Ishtar, as well as 4 skeleton grand archers, were waiting for Lux to give them orders. Lux admired his team of skeletons and grinned evilly as he gave them the order to move out. Their first destination was the lair of the red-eyed Terramantis, who, according to the ants, had already spawned after it was killed a few weeks ago. After his nice long chat with the ants, he had come to the understanding that all the other insects were now rallying behind the red-eyed Terramantis in order to resist the red-striped predator mosquitoes, common monster, obsidian spite mosquitoes, rank 1 monster, and scaled torment mosquitoes, rank 2 monster. Truth be told, Lux had a feeling that there might be mosquitoes whose tiers might have reached rank 3 or worse, rank 4. This was something that the half-elf didn't want to see. He was afraid that if a mosquito had really reached rank 4, there would be a new boss in the Figaro Gardens, and it wouldn't be the red-eyed Terramantis. A mosquito boss would be much harder to deal with. As they drew closer to their designated location, the buzzing sound also intensified. The red-headed teenager was monitoring the situation using Diablo's eyes and ears while hiding inside the ant's nest. There was simply no way that he would take the risk and accompany his summons to fight against thousands of mosquitoes that could suck his blood dry and turn him into a dried husk. His team of skeletons slowed their movements as they observed the ongoing battle from afar. A never-seen-before team battle between hundreds of the insects that resided in the Figaro Garden against the mosquito swarm that outnumbered them 5-1. The half-elf was delighted as he watched such a scene because, for him, all of the monsters were simply free skill and stats points that were waiting to be claimed by him. As body parts of monsters piled up on the ground, Lux noticed that the majority of those that had died were simply common monsters. In the monster world, common monsters were merely cannon fodder that could be used to exhaust the enemies. The true combatants were the rank 1 and rank 2 monsters, who were engaged in mortal combat. While everyone was fighting, Lux was looking for the red-eyed Terramantis, who was nowhere to be found. Suddenly, several giant flowers were sliced apart as the alpha beast of the Figaro Gardens entered the scene. However, the half-elf noticed that the red-eyed Terramantis didn't enter the fray right away. Instead, it looked in the distance, eyeing a dozen-meter-long mosquitoes, whose exoskeleton had taken a greenish hue. After using his Elysium Compendium to identify the new monsters, the red-headed teenager found that his fears became a reality. Ruthless venom mosquitoes, Lux muttered. Rank 3 monsters. Although these dozen rank 3 monsters were weaker than the alpha beast, their numbers still posed a problem. Just like the name implied, these mosquitoes carried a powerful venom in their bites, which had a high chance of poisoning their target. Aside from that, there was also a medium chance that their victims would become paralyzed in just one bite as well. With this deadly combination, the rank 3 mosquitoes were something that the red-eyed Terramantis wouldn't dare attack recklessly. Since the big shots were simply eyeing each other and not making any moves, the battle of the lower ranks raged on. The fight was so intense that the half-elf thought that their skirmish would end in less than 15 minutes. What should I do? Lux thought. Should I help the insects? Or should I help the mosquitoes? The red-headed teenager pondered this question for a bit as he eyed the battlefield with a serious expression on his face. After weighing the pros and cons on who to help, the half-elf ordered his skeletons to help the mosquitoes vanquish their enemies. Although he knew that this was the wrong thing to do, Lux simply went ahead with his plan due to one simple reason. Mosquitoes only drink blood. They don't eat beast cores, Lux muttered. Since that is the case, I'll just help them kill the other insects faster. Don't think badly of me. This is just pure business. After receiving Lux's orders, the skeletons sprang into action. They immediately attacked the insects and targeted their wings and legs, crippling them and allowing the mosquitoes to go in for the kill. Diablos, Ishtars, and the skeleton's appearance had a profound effect on the battle. They were high-ranking monsters, so their battle prowess was enough to tilt the advantage in favor of the mosquitoes. The red-eyed terror mantis screeched in anger as it opened its wings to fly towards Diablo and the others. However, Ishtar's ranged attacks, that were imbued with the ice element, slowed its movement by a good margin. Seeing that an opportunity arrived, the ruthless venom mosquitoes joined in and attacked the alpha beast from all sides. This was the effect that Lux had wanted to achieve, and he couldn't help but laugh madly while he was inside the ant nest. That's it. Die and give your beast cores to me. Lux laughed. No matter what happened, he would get the red-eyed terror mantis body parts this time without fail. Back then, he was forced to compromise and sell the parts of the alpha monster to Frederick and his party. Now it was different. He was hunting the alpha beast solo while using the mosquitoes as a way to weaken it. The monster parts of the red-eyed terror mantis were very valuable. Its exoskeleton could be used as armor, while its claws could be used to forge a unique sword. However, Lux didn't plan to forge the weapon right away. The reason? Because the Elysium Compendium had reminded him that a better weapon could be crafted using 10 claws from the red-eyed terror mantis. If crafted properly, the weapon had a high chance of becoming a pseudo-mythical weapon that had a sharpness that could cut through steel. In order to achieve this, the red-headed teenager needed to fight the alpha monster 5 times in order to collect 5 sets of claws. This was something that beginners knew nothing about. In fact, there were only a handful of individuals in the entirety of the Guellivan kingdom who knew about this, and all of them were master and grandmaster blacksmiths. Randolph was a master blacksmith, so he also knew the recipe of this pseudo-mythical weapon. However, he kept his lips shut tight and would only buy these monster parts from the dwarves at a very high price, silently. In fact, Blood Moon was made with 5 sets of claws from the red-eyed terror mantis, teeth from the forest wolf king, and the beast cores of 3 high-ranking noble vampires, whose rank was no lower than Viscount. Creating this weapon was no easy feat because the chances of failure were high. Fortunately, against all odds, Randolph had succeeded and the mythical weapon Blood Moon was born. As Randolph's disciple, he had learned the recipe from his master, which made him want to craft a Blood Moon of his own. Because of this, he decided to just collect the parts he needed while he was still in Leaf Village. That way, he would be able to craft the weapon that made Diablo a killing machine. After the mosquitoes gained the advantage in battle, Lux ordered his skeletons to slowly back away to the outskirts of the battlefield. He was quite far from the location of the battle, and he didn't want to lose any more of his forces. Among the 7 skeleton fighters, 3 had died in battle. The skeleton grand archers suffered no losses because they were attacking from a safe distance and were protected by Ishtar. The half-elf had also ordered Diablo to not use any of his flashy moves, so that Blood Moon's ability would be hidden from the high-ranking monsters. He planned to deliver the coup de grace when they least expect it, giving them no time to evade the deadly blow that would end their lives. Just like the mantis stalking the cicada, unaware of the oriole from behind, Lux manipulated his forces to attack the insects that were a safe distance from the battle being waged between the rank 3 mosquitoes and the alpha monster that ruled the Figaro Garden. The red-headed teenager knew that the alpha monster was not an easy opponent to beat, but he would be damned if he allowed the rascal to get away after he had decided to claim its monster parts as his own. Diablo, pay extra close attention to the red-eyed terror mantis, Lux ordered. Once it enters its berserk state, pull out as fast as you can. Stop all hostilities against the insects and get as far from the battlefield as possible. The half-elf knew that in that brief period of time, when the red-eyed terror mantis entered berserk mode, its stats would double, and it would become unstoppable. He planned to wait patiently until the berserk effect wore off before going in for the kill. In the meantime, Lux had resummoned the skeletal fighters that died and ordered them to regroup with everyone in battle. Although the journey from Lux's location to Diablo's was several minutes away, he figured that it was enough time for his forces to regroup and take advantage of the weakened alpha monster so they could end its life once and for all. Due to Ishtar's and the skeleton Grand Archer's harassment of the red-eyed terror mantis, the mosquitoes were able to take advantage of the situation and collectively bombarded the mantis with venomous sprays that whittled its health away. The other insects, who realized that their leaders were losing the battle, decided to shift their attention to the skeletons that had appeared out of nowhere. However, Diablo stood in front of his subordinates and fought with Blood Moon in hand. Although 2 more skeleton fighters died during the collision, Diablo was more than enough to hold off several enemies at once. After all, he was a rank 2 monster, and he had a mythical weapon on hand. The mosquitoes had figured out that the skeletons were on their side, so they used this opportunity to deal significant losses to their enemies. In the end, Diablo and only 2 other skeletal fighters remained as the vanguard, while Ishtar and the skeleton Grand Archers fired volley after volley of attacks aimed at the red-eyed terror mantis in the distance. 5 minutes later, the eyes of the red-eyed terror mantis glowed brightly. This was a sign that it was about to use its berserk skill, which Lux and Diablo had been waiting for. As soon as the alpha monster showed signs of going berserk, the skeletons immediately stopped attacking and ran away like there was no tomorrow. A few seconds after they left the battlefield, an angry screech that was similar to nails scratching a steel resounded in the surroundings. The red-eyed terror mantis berserk state doesn't happen right away. It was a gradual strengthening that increased all of its stats by 50% after several minutes had passed. The best way to fight against it was to let it activate berserk, then run away until its duration ended. All alpha beasts and field bosses had berserk skills. This was why they were the hardest to fight, and also why they were more dangerous than normal monsters. The red-eyed terror mantis was a high-tiered rank 2 beast. Although it was only rank 2, it was stronger than most rank 3 monsters. Once it entered its berserk state, its strength would reach the middle stages of rank 3, which would put it on par with a rank 4 monster at its peak. Since it was a high-tiered monster, its health and defenses were stronger than most, so it was impossible to fight it alone, even if the opponent was also a rank 4 monster. Lux had looked for all of the information related to the red-eyed terror mantis because it was one of the most dangerous alpha beasts in the beginner's zone, only second to the field boss, the Forest Wolf King. Those who had reached the rank of apostles would usually challenge this alpha monster as proof of their strength before leaving the Leaf Village, just like Frederick's party did when their party had reached the apostle rank. Powerful gusts of wind blew in every direction as the red-eyed terror mantis unleashed a devastating attack against the mosquitoes that had encircled it. Its sharp claws sliced anything in its path, including the rank 2 monsters, the scaled torment mosquitoes. The ruthless venom mosquitoes, who were rank 3 monsters, stayed outside of its attack zone and only hurled venomous sprays from afar. The alpha beast knew that it was fighting on borrowed time, so it jumped towards one of the rank 3 mosquitoes like a cannonball. It then opened its wings for an extra burst of speed, closing the distance in 2 heartbeats. The mantis claws sliced the ruthless venom mosquito's wings cleanly off its body, which made the rank 3 monster fall to the ground. Surprisingly, the mantis didn't go for the kill. In fact, the moment it landed on the ground, it leapt towards another mosquito and sliced its wings in half. Mosquitoes can walk and crawl, but their speed was nothing compared to how fast they could fly in the air. The moment they landed on the ground, several angry insects, who were weaker than the mosquitoes, mobbed them, despite the latter being stronger. One by one, the rank 3 mosquitoes fell on the ground until only 4 were left. These mosquitoes had already flown to a height that couldn't be reached by the mantis, which prevented the alpha monster from continuing its rampage. Since that was the case, the mantis focused its attention on the rank 3 monsters that it had crippled earlier and were now being attacked by the angry insects that they had terrorized for days. Even so, these mosquitoes were still rank 3 monsters, so they overpowered their enemies and killed them one by one. The red-eyed mantis was really the only one that could cut through their defenses, and that was what it did. It slashed at them repeatedly until green blood oozed out of their bodies. After killing the last ruthless venom mosquito, the glow on the alpha monster's eye waned, signaling that its berserk state had passed. This was the moment that Lux and the mosquitoes were waiting for. After seeing that their nemesis had stopped moving, the remaining ruthless venom mosquitoes swooped in for the kill. This was a once-in-a-lifetime chance to suck the alpha monster's blood dry and gain the chance to evolve into a higher species. This was the ultimate goal of all creatures. Even common monsters had the ability to evolve, but only if they consumed enough beast cores, or if the requirements for their evolution was met. The skeletons, who had now returned to the outskirts of the battlefield, observed this from afar. Although they were all made up of bones, a look of anticipation could be seen in the flickering lights within their hollow eye sockets. Lux, who was safely hidden inside the ant nest, smiled evilly as he waited for the battle to end. The alpha beast was on its last legs, and it was only a matter of time before it fell. Right now, it was a race against time for both the mosquitoes and the insects that were putting up a strong resistance until the red-eyed terror mantis recovered from its weakened state. The 4 remaining ruthless venom mosquitoes swooped down from the sky and then sprayed venomous sprays at the mantis, which had just transitioned into its weakened state after using its berserk skill. The alpha beast was helpless against the ranged attacks that rained down on its body. The most it could do was raise its claws, taking on a defensive stance, covering as much of its body as it could. Its strong and sturdy exoskeleton was covered in venomous sprays in no time, but the terror mantis was mostly unaffected by the mosquito's attack. Feeling impatient at their lack of progress, the ruthless venomous mosquitoes decided to try some hit-and-run tactics and use their sharp and powerful needles to pierce the mantis' protective armor in an attempt to inject their venom directly inside the latter's body. Out of the 4 mosquitoes, the mantis was able to seriously injure one of them after it came close to its strike range. The other 2, the mosquitoes, were able to pierce its armor and inject their venom, but the 4th barely evaded a ferocious swipe that was aimed at its head. Seeing this scene, Lux knew that he needed to do something or the alpha beast would recover from its lethargic state. He no longer cared about being the one to deal the finishing blow to the mantis. All he cared about was that it died. Ishtar and the skeleton archers fired volley after volley of arrows, while Diablo and the 2 remaining skeleton fighters stood in front of them, serving as shields and protecting them from insects whose attention had shifted to them. Ishtar's attack was incredibly deadly, especially when it was up against an unmoving target. The skeleton hunter used her bow's exclusive passive skill, Shot to the Heart, which dealt double damage if it successfully hit the spot where the target's heart was located. Although the alpha beast was using its claws to shield that part of its body, Ishtar didn't care. For her, it didn't matter whether the mantis was blocking her attack or not. If the alpha beast chose to block her attack, then the mosquitoes would be able to attack its blind spot, using their sharp needle-like mouths to pierce its body. Ishtar activated her skill-piercing arrow, which pushed the alpha beast from where it stood with its powerful impact. Just as Lux expected, the mosquitoes used this opportunity to attack the mantis in its blind spots, making it shriek in pain. Ishtar didn't relent in her attacks, and fired one piercing shot after the other. Soon, the red-eyed terror mantis decided that it had had enough and decided to go all out and kill as many as it could before it died. Unfortunately for him, Ishtar's passive ability to shoot ice arrows had greatly slowed its movement and attack speed, which made its last attempts futile. It was also at that moment that Ishtar's arrow pierced its chest, making it shriek in frustration. The passive skill Shot to the Heart activated, dealing great damage to the mantis, pushing it one step closer to its death. 2 minutes later, The alpha beast of the Figaro Garden uttered a blood-curdling shriek before collapsing on the ground. It had breathed its last, which signaled the end of the battle. The surviving insects hurriedly escaped because they knew that, without their leader, they no longer stood a chance against the mosquitoes. The ruthless venom mosquitoes greedily pounced on the dead mantis and sucked its blood. It was the reason why they had attacked its domain, and they wouldn't leave until they had drained all of its blood. The lower-ranking mosquitoes, on the other hand, flew after the insects that ran away. Because they knew that there was no way that they would get a share of the alpha beast, they chose to settle for the other insects who were running away in every direction. While the ruthless venom mosquitoes focused their attention on the mantis, they didn't notice that a small team of skeletons had already made their way to their location. Without any warning, Diablo leapt through the air and stabbed Blood Moon on the back of the head of one of the mosquitoes that had received a serious injury during the battle against the red-eyed terror mantis. The ruthless venom mosquito instantly lost its life, not knowing how it died. Its companions were a bit slow to react, so Diablo was able to thrust its sword to another mosquito, aiming at its left eye. At that exact moment, a whistling sound was simultaneously heard, and a magic arrow pierced the mosquito's right eye, embedding itself directly into its brain, dealing critical damage. Diablo's sword also pierced the mosquito's left eye at that exact moment, which dealt critical damage as well. The combined attack between Lux's two named creatures was executed with perfection that their target had no time to react, which led to its death. Suddenly, a shower of arrows poured like rain on the location where the two other mosquitoes were about to take flight. The Grand Skeleton archers had activated their team attack, crippling volley, which had a high chance to paralyze their enemies. The two mosquitoes' bodies stiffened as the paralyzing effects of the attack activated. Diablo kicked one of the ruthless venom mosquitoes, sending its body flying into the air before targeting the other mosquito, which was struggling to move on the ground. A magical arrow flew straight and true, piercing a spot on the back of the mosquito's body where its heart was located. Ishtar and the Grand Skeletal archers focused fire on the fallen mosquito, while Diablo and the two remaining skeletal fighters gangbanged the other one. The mosquitoes looked at the skeletons in anger because they thought that they were on the same side. What they didn't know was Lux and his team weren't on anyone's side. Their goal was to take advantage of the situation and collect as many beast cores and monster parts as possible. After a few minutes of one-sided beating, the two rank 3 mosquitoes finally died. Diablo hurriedly activated the enchanted beast ring and stored the body of the red-eyed terror mantis, as well as the bodies of the 4 mosquitoes had just been slain. Ishtar and the other grand archer skeletons regrouped with Diablo and began the tedious process of beast core collection. Lux's skeletons had acquired an inventory after they got upgraded. Although it wasn't big, it was more than enough to store 100 beast cores per skeleton monster. The fun part about this item inventory skill was that Lux could directly transfer those items from the skeleton's inventory into his through the soul book. This was something that was never heard before in Elysium, and a half-elf felt that Ariel had tweaked his soul book to allow such things to happen. It was the only explanation Lux could think of, and he was more than happy to abuse this feature. "It's too bad that the monster storage ring has a limit," Lux muttered. "If possible, I'd like a few more of those." The half-elf knew that storage items that could store the monster's entire bodies cost a lot. However, he understood well that buying those would be worth it. If he happened to kill a rare monster in the future, bringing it back, instead of dismantling its body and only taking the most important part of its body, would be more profitable. While Lux's skeletons were busy prying the beast cores from the dead insects on the ground, the sound of buzzing once again permeated the air. The red-headed teenager knew that their time was up. Although he wanted to get as many cores as possible at this time, he couldn't allow his cover to be blown at this point in time. The mosquitoes thought of Diablo and the others as allies, so it would be a shame to not take advantage of it. In the end, Lux unsummoned his skeletons to make sure that no traces would be left behind. This was a safer option than letting the mosquitoes discover what they had been doing while they were going after the fleeting insects that had escaped the battlefield. 5 of my skeletal fighters are already on their way to that location, Lux thought. It will be more than enough time to let the mosquitoes drink their fill before I order them to resume the collection of beast cores. Lux grinned evilly as he summoned Diablo, Ishtar, and the rest of his skeletons one by one. They would return to the Leaf Village and dispose of the monster parts in his master's smithy, so that they could free up some space for the second round of looting. He was sure that Randolph wouldn't mind if he left those monster bodies behind. In fact, he believed Faye the dwarf would be more than happy to take the monsters' bodies off his hands, especially the body of the red-eyed Terramantis. They made a deal earlier that Randolph would take the mantis parts, except for the claws, as compensation for letting Lux use Blood Moon. Lux didn't mind sharing those things with his master because this would not be the first and last time that he would be fighting the red-eyed Terramantis. He was planning on collecting enough mantis claws until he had enough to forge his own Blood Moon. This way, he would no longer need to borrow his master's mythical weapon. Lux believed that with hard work, he would be able to craft a mythical weapon of his own. All he needed to do was patiently collect the items that were needed before leaving the beginner's area, the dwarven kingdom of Guelevin. You did well, Lux, Randolph said as he looked at the corpse of the red-eyed Terramantis that was strewn across the ground of his warehouse. Can you tell me the current situation in the Figaro Gardens? Lux nodded his head and explained how the battle of mosquitoes and the insects played out. He also told him about how they interfered with the battle and how he backstabbed the mosquitoes when they least expected it. Randolph listened as he rubbed his beard. After Lux finished his tale, the dwarf sighed before he patted his disciple's back. You're one goddamn backstabber. Randolph chuckled. Are you going back to the Figaro Gardens? Lux nodded. The night is still young, and there are still many corpses to be collected. It will be a waste if I leave them behind. Randolph understood that Lux was right. Even so, he was concerned about his safety, so he reminded him to not do anything reckless and just let his skeletons do the fighting. After bidding his master goodbye, Lux once again slipped into the Figaro Gardens and headed towards the location of the ant nest. However, along the way, he heard the buzzing sounds of mosquitoes, so he hurriedly took cover in order to hide from them. Diablo and the rest were with him, so he wasn't too worried about his safety. His only concern was that the number of the mosquitoes would be too much for him and his small team to handle. All the skeletons each held a torch in their right hand, which served as a distraction that prevented the mosquitoes from sensing Lux's warm blood. Fortunately, after glancing in their direction, the mosquitoes didn't bother to take a closer look. They just focused on their mission, which was to look for the insects that were currently grouping with each other to resist their overwhelming numbers. Even after the mosquitoes had left the scene, Lux didn't move from where he was hiding. He sent 4 skeletal fighters to scout in different directions to ensure that there was nothing that could threaten his life within the radius of 500 meters. Only after making sure that it was indeed safe to move did the half-elf hurry towards the nearest entrance to the ant nest in order to seek shelter. Just like usual, the ants happily welcomed him after he shared the location of where the latest battle had been fought. Lux's skeletons had already taken the beast cores that he could take from them, so he didn't mind sharing the dead bodies with the ants, who always made sure to keep him safe while he was inside their colony. The mosquitoes were not too keen to fight the ants in their underground tunnels. The lack of maneuverability, as well as the cramped space, prevented them from being able to use their advantage in numbers. One could even say that, among the insects in the Figaro Gardens, it was the ants which were least affected by the one-sided slaughter that was happening on the surface. After arriving to safety, Lux didn't hurry to send out his skeletons. The first thing he was going to do was upgrade them in order to make them stronger. Lux had a dozen rank 3 beast cores, as well as the red-eyed Terramantis Alpha core, which glowed crimson red. He also managed to acquire a total of 50 rank 2 beast cores and 222 rank 1 beast cores, which was more than enough to strengthen his skeleton army by a few grades. Lux still had several beast cores in his collection, which he still hadn't used. After taking a quick look in his inventory to see just how many beast cores he had, he saw 370 rank 1 beast cores, 66 rank 2 beast cores, 12 rank 3 beast cores, and 1 alpha beast core. This was a staggering number. If his grandma Vera were to know how her grandson was faring inside the beginner's village, She would definitely be surprised and would question him about how he had managed to acquire so many beast cores on his own, no matter how one looked at it. Lux was simply a cheat-like character who was abusing the mechanics of the rules inside the beginner's village. Although his rank was still below the apostle grade, his summons had long exceeded the limit of the rank of anyone that could stay in the beginner zone. Lux was like one of those gamers who liked to overlevel themselves before taking on the first boss of the game. This would ensure that the enemy wouldn't pose any threat to him, and he would be able to gain the upper hand in any of the battles that would take place within the different zones of the beginner's village. The half-elf used 43 rank 2 beast cores in order to upgrade Diablo twice. He knew that the one who would decide the success of this mission would be none other than his first-named creature, whose combined stats had reached 560, making him a rank 2 monster in the middle stages. Diablo also learned the skill Expert Trainer, which allowed him to successfully train any kind of monster which rank didn't surpass his by 2 tiers. For example, Diablo was currently a rank 2 monster. He could tame monsters that he could use as his mount as long as they were rank 4 and below. Of course, for higher level monsters, he would have to weaken them first before he could make them submit to become his beast mount. For higher ranked monsters, even if they were near death, Diablo wouldn't be able to tame them because his rank would prevent him from doing so. Ishtar was the next one that Lux upgraded. As the dedicated long-range damage dealer, it was only natural for him to buff up the former who would also play a vital role in the upcoming battle. Just like Diablo, Lux upgraded Ishtar twice, which brought up her combined stat points to 595. She also learned the skill Siege Stance, that rendered her immobile with the trade-off of increasing her attack by 100%. Siege Stance increases damage output by 100% and has a high chance of dealing critical damage for 10 seconds. While in Siege Stance, the user is unable to move from their spot and can only shoot at their enemies like a siege tower. Moving away, jumping, or breaking this stance will cancel the effect of the skill. This skill stacks with any other long-range skills. Lux also upgraded his skeletal fighters once and his skeleton grand archers twice, greatly reducing his stockpile of beast cores, but Lux had no regrets. After all those upgrades, he no longer had any rank 1 beast cores remaining, and only 8 rank 2 beast core was left in his inventory. He didn't touch the rank 3 beast cores, as well as the alpha cores, because he planned to use those for himself after he left Leaf Village. His skeletal fighters learned the skill Whirlwind Slash, which allowed them to deal AoE damage, while the skeleton grand archers learned Poison Arrow, which made their attacks very deadly. This is what you call investment, Lux muttered as he gazed at his skeleton team that had become stronger. Although his way of doing things burned more resources when compared to Colette and the others, the payback was very satisfying. Right now, aside from Diablo and Ishtar, Lux's army was only wearing the basic weapons and armor that he had bought from his master at a very cheap price. If only he could arm them all to the teeth, then forget about forming a party for the dungeon. He could go solo and kill the boss all by himself, as long as his skeletons had the right equipment for the job. Now, let's address the main goal of this trip. Diablo, lead everyone towards the north of the Figaro Gardens, Lux ordered. It's time to raid the mosquito nest and see what is causing this massive outbreak. Lux and Randolph both agreed that what was happening inside the Figaro Garden was a bit abnormal. He wanted to get into the bottom of things. And in order to do that, his forces would first need to travel to the north and investigate the source of the problem. North region of the Figaro Gardens. Someone, who was wearing a dark robe, frowned upon hearing the report of the scaled torment mosquito, rank 2 monster, that he had tasked to supervise the attack on the other regions of the garden. He needed the beast core of the red-eyed terror mantis for the ritual he was planning to make, but its corpse was nowhere to be found. Also, the ruthless venom mosquitoes that led the attack had been all wiped out, which made the frown on his face deepen. He didn't believe that the alpha beast was the one that killed them all, so he conducted a thorough investigation and interrogated the scouting parties that he had assigned to patrol the garden on a regular basis. "Did any of you see anything unusual?" the dark-robed figure asked. "It could be anything that you don't always see in this territory." BC. One of the red-striped mosquitoes flew towards him and spoke about the skeletons that it saw when it was patrolling the area. After hearing his subordinate's report, the person wearing the dark robe smashed his fist on his makeshift table, breaking it in half. After panting for half a minute, he regained his composure as he stared at the giant cocoon that was pulsing beside him like a beating heart. "So, we have a rat in our midst." The dark-robed figure gnashed his teeth. "All of you, find the location of those skeletons. Do not alert them. Just simply encircle the area where they are located. Find any dwarf that you see and bring them to me alive. I would like to have a nice, long talk with the person that is getting on my way." The dark-robed person assumed that the one that was getting on his way was a dwarf. He could not be blamed for thinking that way, because the Guellivan kingdom was a dwarf kingdom. No other races could be seen within its lands, so he deemed that only a dwarf could pose a threat to his plans. Now that he was only one step away from realizing his goals, he would ensure that no more mishaps happened. Although losing the beast core of the alpha beast was troublesome, he had other substitutes that he could use in order to take its place. However, what concerned him was the identity of his enemy. Right now, he was increasing the pace of his experiment because he had heard that the riders of Noria had just dealt with the kobold bandits that were terrorizing the lands. He thought that he still had a few more days before his experiment was complete, but it seemed that fate had other plans for him. Since that was the case, he had no choice but to find the perpetrator and offer their blood to the new breed of monster that would make him and his organization the overlords. An organization that wished to control the dwarf kingdom of Guellivan from the shadows. In the middle of the night, the intense buzzing sounds of insect wings spread across the Figaro Gardens. Diablo, Ishtar, and the other skeletons were sneakily moving towards the north using the darkness as cover. The mosquitoes weren't able to detect them because their bodies didn't give off any heat, making them practically invisible in the former's eyes. As the elite skeleton party neared their destination, they noticed that the monster nest was mostly empty. The robed man had ordered the mosquitoes to look for the traces of the skeletons and capture their summoner. Fortunately, Diablo and his team had been using plenty of the underground tunnels the ants had made to reach the northern regions, which allowed them to bypass the mosquitoes that were looking for them. Diablo gazed at Ishtar, and the latter nodded her head. She then knocked an arrow on her bow and took aim. The skeleton grand archers followed her lead and also prepared to shoot, only waiting for her signal to attack. A few seconds later, a shower of arrows killed the red-striped mosquitoes that were loitering around the entrance of the monster nest. Since they were common monsters, they instantly died from the surprise attack that Ishtar and her archers had unleashed. After making sure that no other monsters were in sight, the group hurriedly entered the nest. Lux, who was watching everything through the eyes of Diablo, frowned. He thought that he and the skeletons would be fighting their way through vast swarms of mosquitoes, but after arriving at their destination, the mosquitoes were nowhere to be found. The half-elf wasn't aware that the majority of them were currently sweeping the Figaro garden in search of Diablo and him. As the skeletons traveled deeper inside the nest, they arrived in what seemed to be a spacious cavern, where a 4-meter-tall, glowing cocoon lay at its center. Beside it was the robed person who was busy chanting incantations, as if reinforcing the cocoon and strengthening whatever was inside it. Before Lux could even assess what was going on, a notification sounded and a series of texts materialized in front of him. Birth of an Abomination. Mission rating S. An unknown organization is conducting an experiment within the beginner's area of the Guellivan Kingdom. Their goal is to create a monster that could potentially make them the overlords of the Dwarf Kingdom to overturn the rule of the royal family. Their plans are still in the initial stages, and it is up to you to stop them. Quest objective: kill the abomination. No matter what happens, the creature must be killed at all cost. Gather information about the unknown organization and pass it to the Knights of Noria. Quest duration: 1 hour. Quest will automatically fail if you fail to subjugate the abomination within the allotted time. Rewards: 100 free stat points, 100 skill points, 100 body constitution points, 500 Elysium gold coins, 500 Riders of Noria reputation points. 100 Kingdom reputation points, exclusive to Kingdom of Guelvin. 2,000 Leaf Village reputation points. A rank S mission. Lux gasped internally after reading the information that had suddenly flashed in front of him. And I only have 1 hour to accomplish it? After staying inside the Leaf Village for a few months, he found that there was not a single rank S mission available for people in the beginner zone. The highest mission available was the subjugation of the field boss, Forest Wolf King, but even that was only a rank A mission. What did that mean? It meant that this mission was harder than subjugating a field boss. It also meant that an elite party of apostles was needed to finish such a task. Fortunately, I upgraded Diablo, Ishtar, and my other skeleton summons. Lux thought as he observed the robed person through Diablo's eyes. Perhaps they will be able to finish this mission if things play out right. Right now, the robed person still hadn't discovered that he was no longer alone inside the cavern. Lux assumed that the identity of the figure was a male dwarf, whose rank was unknown to him. We have the element of surprise in our side. Lux mused as he used Diablo's eyes to look at the cocoon that was pulsing like a human heart. I bet he didn't expect that someone would venture deep inside this nest and discover his sinister plans. Lux decided to act quickly because he didn't know when a mosquito swarm would return to their nest. Also, the timer was ticking and he had less than an hour to finish this task before the mission failed. Ishtar planted her feet firmly on the ground as she activated her siege stance, which would increase all of her attacks by 100%. The skeleton grand archers also posed to fire a crippling volley to paralyze the robed figure, allowing Diablo to close the gap and deal with him. Diablo and the skeleton fighters took a charging position in preparation for their united assault. After everyone had taken their position, Lux gave the order, and Ishtar's piercing arrow flew towards the robed figure. At the same time, the crippling volley was activated. As the whistling of the arrow echoed within the cavern, the robed figure moved his body to the side, barely evading the arrow that grazed the side of his cheek. Ishtar had aimed for his head in order to deal a lethal blow, but her opponent was a veteran that had fought in the battlefield before joining the secret organization. The moment he heard the whistling wind, his body had unconsciously moved to the side, allowing him to barely escape Ishtar's deadly attack. When the rain of arrows that were imbued with paralyzing effects rained down on him, the dwarf raised a staff and created a barrier that repelled the attacks that were meant to incapacitate him. "Who are you?" the dwarf shouted. "What faction do you belong, GUH?" The robed man was forced to stop his questioning when Ishtar's second piercing arrow collided with his shield, breaking it apart. In desperation, he rolled to the ground to evade the arrow that held considerable power to threaten his life. Unfortunately, after rolling to the side, the robed dwarf came face to face with Diablo, who had used his leap attack to smash Blood Moon onto the robed dwarf's head. "Protection!" the dwarf shouted as another barrier appeared in front of him. He hoped that it would be enough to block the unusual attack of the Black Knight that was wielding a red sword in his hand. What followed next was a scream of pain that made Lux breath a sigh of relief from inside the ant nest. Diablo's heavy slash managed to shatter the barrier, but it didn't end there. The dwarf had used a blink spell to escape, but Diablo's bone spear had already materialized in the air. In one swift motion, the bone spear pierced the left arm of the robed figure, making the latter scream in pain. Lux watched as the robe of the dwarf fell down on the ground, revealing his body. The man's scarred face, who seemed to be in his late 30s, appeared in Lux's vision. The dwarf's hair was tied up in a braid, and there were ear piercings on his mouth and nose, making him look intimidating. Fortunately, Lux was not intimidated as he ordered Diablo to engage the dwarf and knock him unconscious. To his surprise, the dwarf once again blinked away and even summoned a fireball that sent Diablo crashing to the wall of the cavern. "Bastards!" the dwarf shouted as he fired fireball after fireball at the skeletons, who did their best to evade. Although his left arm was seriously injured and couldn't be used at this point in time, his tenacity gave the skeletons a very difficult time. At least grade A apostle, Lux thought with a grim expression on his face. This won't do. I need to change my tactics. Lux immediately gave his orders, which Diablo obeyed without fail. The named creature used its leap and swung its sword at the cocoon at the center of the cavern. No, the dwarf shouted as he stopped hurling fireballs at Ishtar and the skeleton grand archers, who were using long, ranged attacks against him. Just like their leader, the skeletal fighters also started to hack the cocoon, using it as a shield to prevent the wizard from firing fireballs at him. Blasted undead! The dwarf screamed as he tapped the butt of his staff on the ground thrice, activating a magic circle. He couldn't possibly just watch as the mission that was entrusted to him was destroyed right in front of his eyes. The dwarf regretted sending all but a few mosquitoes out to look for the skeletons. Because of what he did, the monster nest was left unprotected, which allowed the skeletons to sneak up on him. Damn it, the dwarf cursed internally. Just one more day, and everything would have gone according to plan. Why now? Knowing that he was left with no other alternative, the dwarf forcefully awoke the creature that was inside the cocoon. Although it was going to be a premature birth, it was better than dying at the hands of the skeletons who were hacking its body like crazy. Rise and trample these fools, the dwarf commanded. Come forth. Ash Wing. One of the skeletons that were hacking the cocoon was blown away when a spiny leg emerged from the cocoon. Diablo hurriedly ordered the other skeletons to back away as they observed the beast that was emerging from its shell. A 4-meter-tall, ash-colored mosquito with golden stripes appeared in everyone's vision. Its golden eyes glowed brightly as it glared hatefully at the skeletons who had hurt its body. What made Lux shudder was the fact that the monster had 3 heads instead of 1, which was something he didn't expect from the mosquito. Although the newly born beast looked powerful, it was still in a weakened state after forcefully breaking through its shell. Its wings were quite small, perhaps due to the fact that it was born prematurely, depriving it of its ability to fly, which made the half-elf feel thankful. Just as Lux was about to recover from his shock, an arrow flew to the air and pierced the monster's back, where its heart was located. The ash wing screamed in pain as it tried to move its body closer to the wall in order to prevent it from getting hit from behind. Diablo quickly made his move and used Heavy Slash repeatedly on one of its legs, cutting it in 2. Another loud shriek echoed inside the cavern as the giant mosquito's 3 heads screamed in unison. It then kicked Diablo away, sending him smashing towards the cave wall in order to stop him from continuing to hack at its remaining legs. The other skeletal fighters immediately retreated because they knew that a single kick from the mosquito would be enough to kill them. Although it was still in a weakened state, the fact still remained that it was similar to a field boss that was in the peak stage of rank 3. It's incomplete. This monster cannot be used to further our goals in the Guellivan Kingdom. The dwarf clicked his tongue in annoyance. I shouldn't have been impatient. I should have continued to play it safe until this thing was born properly. Now it's too late. This project has failed. The dwarf broke the bone spear that had pierced his arm and poured a healing potion over it. His wounds healed up completely, but he wouldn't be able to fully use his arm for a few days. Since his plans had failed, he decided to leave and start from scratch. As the man was about to leave, he heard a whistling sound coming from behind his back, and he was forced to roll to his right side to evade whatever it was. Grazing the side of his waist, an arrow shot past him, almost dealing a lethal injury to him had it hit its designated target, which was his heart. Damn it! The dwarf cursed as he opened another healing potion and poured its contents on his injury. Ishtar had shot at him due to Lux's orders. The dwarf couldn't be let go yet because one of Lux's mission objectives was to collect information about the unknown organization and pass it to the Knights of Noria. Since that was the case, he couldn't possibly allow the man to escape at all costs. Diablo, who also received Lux's orders, leapt from the ground and aimed to deliver a fatal blow to the dwarf who seemed to be an apostle-grade mage who specialized in fire magic. Barrier! The dwarf shouted, just in time to block Diablo's heavy slash and prevent the latter from giving him a serious injury. The barrier shattered, but the dwarf was able to use his blink ability to gain distance from his attacker. Just as he was about to cast a fireball at the skeleton in front of him, several whistling sounds reached his ears, which prevented him from doing what he wanted. The dwarf slammed the butt of his staff against the ground, which created a powerful shockwave that repelled the arrows that Ishtar had shot in his direction. Right now, the skeleton grand archers and the skeleton warriors were keeping the Ash Wing's attention, allowing Diablo and Ishtar to work in tandem to defeat the dwarf mage, who was responsible for overturning the balance inside the Figaro Gardens. 10 minutes passed as Diablo and Ishtar fought together against the dwarf, whom Lux had determined to be at least a grade B apostle, rank 3 monster. The dwarf was hard-pressed in dealing with the deadly long-range and short-range attacks that were forcing him to use all of his abilities to their fullest. Meanwhile, the Ash Wing was being attacked by the hit-and-run tactics by the skeleton fighters, constantly being pummeled by volleys of long-range attacks, and gradually increasing the injuries that it had received in total. After fighting against the abomination, Lux realized that aside from its strength and size, the Ash Wing didn't know how to fight. Simply put, it just uses its legs to deliver blows that could be avoided as long as one paid attention to its movements. Just as the dwarf had mentioned, the beast was a failed project because it was born prematurely. None of its deadly weapons were fully developed. The Ash Wing was just an oversized meat shield in a nutshell, which made Lux breathe a sigh of relief. However, although its attacks were very basic, the fact still remained that a single blow from it would be enough to annihilate the skeletons that were running around it. After being locked in a deadly battle with Diablo and Ishtar, the dwarf mage was finally able to take a breather when he successfully blew Diablo away with a fireball that was fired at point-blank range. The dwarf immediately used this opportunity to blink away from the battlefield, and he succeeded. He was quite familiar with the terrain of the monster nest, and had already created several paths of escape to be used once the project had successfully been completed. His clothes were drenched in blood because the battle had truly been intense. Even so, he just kept on running while pouring health potions over his body. Every time the duration of the skill, Blink, became available, he would blink away again. This caused his mana to drop at a rapid rate, but he didn't care. Right now, his priority was to escape the Figaro Garden and report his findings to their organization. Suddenly, something unexpected happened. Right after he blinked to a location, the ground underneath his feet exploded. The dwarf found his left arm being pierced through by a sword, which made him scream in pain. Lux was riding on top of a silver ant, and he used the momentum of its charge to impale the dwarf, who was the ringleader of everything. However, his attack was not over yet. Mana drain, Lux shouted as he grabbed hold of the dwarf's left arm, which he had pierced with his sword. Mana drain was a ranged spell that absorbed 2% of the target's maximum mana for 5 seconds. Lux knew that his current stats were not strong enough to fight against the enemy, so he decided to use the only thing that he could do, and that was to prevent him from using magic. The dwarf panicked as he felt his remaining mana be taken away from him. As a mage, all of his attacks relied on mana. His mana was already dangerously low, and now even that was being taken away from him. "Who are you?" The dwarf screamed in anger as he tried to break free from Lux's firm hold. "Why are you getting in our way?" Lux didn't bother to answer the dwarf's question, as he pulled his sword out of the dwarf's arm so he could stab his enemy's chest. Unfortunately, the dwarf was stronger than him, so the latter managed to kick Lux away the moment he pulled the sword that was piercing his arm out. After escaping from Lux's grasp, the dwarf ran away, only to be pinned down by the silver ant that Lux was using as a mount. The name of the ant was the Speedy Silver Ant, and, just as the name suggested, it was the fastest ant in the ant colony. Lux had asked for its help in order to reach the nest as soon as possible, to help his summons deal with the situation. The duration of the mission was only an hour, so the half-elf decided to go to the site and personally handle the matter in order to clear his mission. "Annoying ant," the dwarf roared in anger. "Fire bullet." The silver ant screamed after it was hit by the magical attack, which allowed the mage to use his blink skill to distance himself from the rank 1 monster, whose only merit was its fast-running speed. This time around, the dwarf had been drained completely of his mana reserves. However, just like everyone in his organization, he had brought several potions with him, and 2 of them were mana potions. Unfortunately, just as he was about to drink one of them, the bottle he was holding in his hand shattered when an arrow passed through it. A second later, his chest was impaled by a bone spear, which pinned him to a nearby tree. The dwarf spat a mouthful of blood as he looked in disbelief at the enemies that had appeared in front of him. I knew that the hunter's mark is indispensable when hunting prey, Lux stated as he walked towards the dwarf who was barely clinging onto life. I just didn't know that the first thing I would be hunting was not a beast, but a dwarf. Sorry, Mr. Dwarf. This is checkmate. Lux raised his hand and sneered at the slippery dwarf who always used his blink skill to escape the battle. Mana drain. The dwarf spat a mouthful of blood before his entire body stiffened. For magicians and other spellcasters, being deprived of mana was the same as being deprived of their health. When a magician loses all of his mana and goes into a deficit, their whole body enters a state of shock, which knocks them unconscious. When they entered this state, they wouldn't be able to regenerate mana for 24 hours, and their bodies would enter a weakened state, making it impossible for them to cast spells. Diablo pulled the bone spear embedded on the dwarf's chest out, which made the latter fall to the ground. Lux poured just a bit of healing potion on the bloody hole to close it up. The half-elf had no intention of healing his enemy. He just wanted to keep him alive until he handed him personally to the riders of Noria, who were stationed in Leaf Village. The half-elf rummaged through the dwarf's belongings and took everything of value from his body. Storage rings, storage bags, his staff, and other miscellaneous items. He had no time to inspect them all, because the battle was not over. For the time being, he stored all of these items in his inventory for safekeeping. The red-headed teenager then took ropes out from his storage ring and tied the dwarf up properly and tight in order to prevent him from escaping. Just to be on the safe side, he had Ishtar cast another hunter's mark on the dwarf as insurance, if he happened to wake up before they finished dealing with the abomination. Speedy, can you take him to your nest for the time being? Lux asked the silver ant that had brought him to the battlefield. Speedy clicked its mandibles and nodded its head before picking up the dwarf on the ground. He then carried him towards the hole that he had made earlier and disappeared from Lux's sight. The half-elf finally breathed a sigh of relief as he stared at Diablo and Ishtar, who stood a few meters away from him. Let's go, Lux ordered. There's one last pest remaining. Lux ran towards the entrance of the nest along with Diablo and Ishtar. Now that the ringleader was defeated, all they needed to do was whittle the Ash Wing's health away and put an end to the abomination that threatened the lives of everyone inside the Figaro Gardens. A blood-curdling screech reverberated across the monster nest as the Ash-wing mosquito went berserk. This was its last resort to kill Lux and his skeletons that had backed it into a corner. Lux panted as he distanced himself from the monster who was nearing its end. Although his health and mana was still full, the mental exhaustion he received from fighting the dwarf and commanding his skeletons piled up and took a toll on his body. Diablo and the skeleton fighters had died plenty of times because Lux had ordered them to do suicide attacks, with the intention of cutting of the monster's legs to prevent it from moving around. In the end, they succeeded, and only one leg remained on the diabolical beast's body. And even though it had entered a berserk state, the only thing it could do was glare at Lux and his skeletons while helplessly accepting their beating. The red-headed teenager did his best to calm his breathing as he stared at the dying monster in front of him. He was quite thankful that the dwarf had been forced to make the monster be born prematurely, which rendered all of its fighting abilities incomplete. Without wings to fly, it was no different from a stationary target that the skeletons, whom the half-elf could summon over and over again, could beat up. 5 minutes later, the crimson eyes of the three-headed abomination, which glared hatefully at them, eventually lost their luster and turned dim. The abomination's body collapsed on the ground, dead. Lux didn't move from his spot until he heard the notification, which said that his mission had successfully been completed. Several words appeared in front of him, congratulating him on his victory against the diabolical monster. Birth of an Abomination. Mission rating S. Completed. Rewards: 100 free stat points, 100 skill points, 100 body constitution points, 500 Elysium gold coins. 500 Riders of Noria reputation points. 100 Kingdom reputation points, exclusive to the Kingdom of Guelvin. 2,000 Leaf Village reputation points. Bonus reward. Choose one among these options. Option 1. Hell Horse, a hellish creature known for its cruelty as it terrorizes its victims until they draw their last breath. They are found in places where the miasma is thick, or in ancient battlefields where they are known to spawn from the malevolent stench of death that lingers after the lives of thousands have been claimed. This monster's rank would always be equivalent to the rank of its master. Option 2. Golden Token of Guelvin. This token is one of the 13 tokens that the founder of the Guelvin Kingdom had made when he was crowned king of the Dwarves' lands. After several years had passed, these tokens changed owners many times before disappearing over the course of history. It is said that if you present this token to the reigning king of the kingdom, you will be given the title of Honorary Knight, which would give you certain benefits within the Dwarf Kingdom. Option 3. Monster Egg, an unknown monster egg, which you can hatch at the nearest bestiary near you. Depending on your luck, the monsters that could be born from the egg can be common monsters, rare monsters, unique monsters, mythical monsters, or legendary monsters. Option 4. Teleport Scroll, 4 pieces. This scroll will directly send you to any places that you have visited, regardless of the restrictions that were set in place. For example, if you have become an apostle or a high ranker and you wish to return to the Leaf Village, using this scroll will allow you to return without suffering any backlash from the restrictions. If you want to bully children, this is the perfect item to satisfy your sadistic desires. Lux whistled after seeing the list of bonus rewards that he could choose from after completing the mission. Although each option was good, and picking one of them now was tempting, the half-elf decided to set it aside for now because he was still not safe from danger. The first thing Lux did was to take the beast core out from the dead monster's body, before storing the body inside his enchanted beast ring, which was capable of storing the corpses of any monster regardless of their size. After safely storing his prize, Lux hurriedly ran towards the hole that his friend, Speedy, had made. Surprisingly, the silver ant was still by the time he arrived, as if waiting to carry the half-elf for the return trip back inside their ant nest. Lux didn't hesitate and mounted the silver ant's back, which was almost 1.5 meters tall. Just as Speedy entered the underground tunnel that it had temporarily made along the way, the red-headed teenager heard the buzzing sounds of thousands of wings. The half-elf breathed a sigh of relief at the thought of their very timely escape out of the monster nest. Even though Diablo, Ishtar, and the rest of his skeletons were strong, they were still not a match against the thousands of mosquitoes that had been looking for them for several hours in the Figaro Gardens. Several hours later, inside Leaf Village. "Are you sure about this?" the village head of Leaf Village, Sedwin, asked. "Yes," Lux replied. "If not, I wouldn't have asked Master Randolph to call all of you out in the middle of the night." Sedwin's eyes narrowed as he looked down at the tied-up dwarf who was laying on the floor. The elders of the village, as well as Boreas, the captain of the Riders of Noria who were stationed in the village, were also present in the scene. All the dwarves had grim expressions on their faces as they gazed at the unconscious man. "Do you have any other proof?" Boreas asked. "Sedwin has already passed the documents to me, but this can be forged easily. Don't get me wrong, it's not that I'm doubting you, but for something major like this, I need more concrete proof before I can report this to my superior." Lux nodded his head in understanding. "I have proof, but it will not fit this place. Let's go outside." The half-elf didn't wait for the dwarf's reply before leaving the room. Boreas signaled for 2 of his men to watch the unconscious dwarf before following behind Lux. Sedwin, Randolph, and the other elders of the village also followed the red-headed teenager outside the house. They were very curious about what kind of proof Lux would present to them, so that they would be convinced that he was telling them the truth. Only Randolph, who was Lux's blacksmith master, had a smug smile on his face. He had already seen the ash wing, which had given him a fright. He and Lux were confident that after everyone had seen the corpse of the beast, they would understand that Leaf Village had survived a close call due to Lux's intervention. "Dear Goddess," Sedwin muttered as he stared at the three-headed abomination whose body Lux had summoned behind the village chief's residence. This was the first time Sedwin had seen such a creature in his life, and he was sure that this was not a natural-born monster. The only explanation for its existence was that it was artificially bred from an experiment, which forced it to mutate and turn into the horrific creature they were looking at. Boreas circled the beast and appraised its entire body. After inspecting it for a few minutes, he glanced at Lux as he gave his verdict. "Rank 3 Alpha Beast," Boreas declared. "How did you kill it?" With a glance, the captain of the Riders of Noria, who was often stationed in Leaf Village, could tell that if the creature stood on its legs, it would be 4 meters tall at the bare minimum. Just thinking about a mosquito with a size as big as this was enough to make everyone's hearts tremble. "Take a good look at its wings," Lux replied. He had already prepared a story about his confrontation with the monster, in order to make it sound that he just got lucky with the encounter. As you can see, its wings were undeveloped, so it was incapable of flight, Lux explained. "I attacked it while it was still inside its cocoon, so it was helpless under my assault. I hacked it over and over until it died. After that, I hurriedly left the scene and returned here to the village." Boreas frowned. As someone who had fought powerful monsters in the past, this was not his first time seeing such a high-tiered creature. What concerned him was that Lux wasn't strong enough to defeat this monster on his own. He had been there when the half-elf had been carried to the makeshift infirmary site that the dwarves of Leaf Village had made after the monster outbreak of the undead army. Back then, Lux was unable to defeat even a rank 1 monster. The abomination in front of him was an alpha beast, which Boreas assumed to be at least a rank 3 monster. In simpler terms, it was extremely powerful. Even though he believed that Lux was just lucky and killed the beast while it was inside its cocoon, that couldn't explain how he managed to capture the dwarf mage that was inside the monster nest as well. Only a fool would dare to raid a monster nest alone, because anyone would know that doing so was suicide. Boreas decided to just wait until he had time to talk with the commander of Noria, who was currently in their stronghold. "Very well. I will interrogate the dwarf mage and get into the bottom of this mess," Boreas said after much contemplation. "However, I will need to bring this monster to our stronghold so that our specialists can study its body. Perhaps we will be able to better understand how this abomination was made." Lux nodded in understanding. In truth, he didn't know what to do with the giant mosquito because even his master, Randolph, said that its parts weren't good enough as a material to forge weapons and armor. At most, the alchemist could use its body parts and organs as ingredients to concoct potions and other miscellaneous items that might be useful to him in the future. "What about the beast core?" Boreas asked. "Did you take it?" "Of course," Lux replied. "After all, it was my kill." Boreas nodded. Although it was regrettable that they wouldn't be able to study the beast core, as the one who killed the beast, it was Lux's right to take possession of it. Giving them a whole corpse was already a generous move on the half-elf's part, so Boreas didn't ask for more. "I expect that the Riders of Noria will give some rewards to Lux as well," Randolph, the half-elf's blacksmith master, said. If he hadn't stopped this organization's plans, then this territory might have been compromised completely. "Tell that to your commander as well." Boreas sighed and reluctantly nodded his head. He couldn't refute Randolph's words because it was the truth. He believed that if the monster was born properly and had the time to grow to its fullest, the possibility of it reaching rank 5 was very high. A rank 5 alpha beast in the beginner's area was completely unheard of. The damage the monster and its lackeys could have brought to the population of Noria would have definitely been astounding. It might have been able to force the dwarves to leave the village just to escape from the calamity that was about to befall them. "I will make sure to report your good deed to my commander," Boreas said as he looked at Lux. "You have done the kingdom a great service." "I'm just happy to help," Lux replied. However, the problem in the Figaro Gardens still persists. If possible, the Riders of Noria should still perform an extermination to ensure that such a beast can't be born again. "Understood. I will request for more reinforcements from our stronghold," Boreas promised. "I'll be taking my leave so we can make the necessary preparations." After saying his parting words, Boreas gave a brief nod to Sedwin before heading to the makeshift barracks where his subordinates were staying. This was an important event, and the sooner he reported it to his commander, the sooner it would be taken care of. Lux sighed in relief because Boreas didn't ask him anything else. Right now, the only thing he wanted was to go back to his room in the inn and get some rest. The battle in the Figaro garden had drained him physically and mentally. Seeing his exhausted expression, Sedwin announced that the meeting was adjourned and once again thanked Lux for the meritorious service that he had made to their village. Because of this, he decided to reward the other party at a later day, after he had discussed this matter in full with the other elders of the village. After bidding his goodbye to Sedwin, the elders and Lux's master, Randolph, Lux finally got to go back to the inn where he, upon entering the room, collapsed on the bed. He didn't even bother changing his clothes and simply laid on top of the bed after removing his shoes. He had accomplished his main goal of going to the Figaro Gardens. As for the mosquito swarm, he would just leave the rest of it in the hands of the riders of Noria. As the half-elf slept a dreamless sleep, Sedwin and the elders continued their discussion about Lux's rewards. Randolph made sure that the other elders weren't too stingy with their proposed rewards, which made Grandma Annie, the old lady dwarf who had a close relationship with Lux, smile. She didn't expect that the half-elf, who had appeared in their small village several weeks ago, would become a promising individual that would catch everyone. Lux scratched his head in confusion as he walked towards the east gate of Leaf Village. After waking up and leaving his room, he realized that there was a sudden change in the way the dwarves of Leaf Village look at him. Ever since he helped them defend Leaf Village during the monster outbreak, the dwarves stopped distancing themselves from him and even treated him civilly during his stay. However, it was different as to how they were being extra friendly now, which made the half-elf wonder if he had woken up on the wrong side of the bed. The tavern owner even gave him 2 additional eggs when he ordered his usual order for breakfast, bacon and eggs. The middle-aged dwarf insisted that it was on the house, and didn't ask Lux to pay for the extra. The people in the tavern would also give him a brief smile whenever he met their gaze, which made Lux wonder if they were pranking him or something. This series of unexpected changes followed the half-elf as he walked towards the east gate to meet with Colette and the others. Everyone was looking at him in a kind and friendly manner, which made him pinch himself several times to ensure that he wasn't still dreaming. "You're finally here, big brother," Colette said as she ran and jumped into Lux's arms, which, as usual, made Matty shoot daggers using his eyes to the half-elf, who hurriedly opened his arms to catch the lively little cannonball that jumped at him so early in the morning. "Have you been good while I wasn't around?" Lux asked after successfully catching the giggling little dwarf. Colette replied. "Yesterday we defeated a berserk horned rabbit with just the 5 of us." "Wow, that's amazing, right?" Lux chuckled as he patted Colette's head. A berserk horned rabbit was a rank 2 monster, which could be found near the center of the Aspiration Plains where the carbuncle resided. He guessed that the Golden Slayer party, headed by Colette, was preparing for their inevitable battle with the carbuncle. The half-elf had assumed that they had already consumed beast cores that were given to them by their parents in order to boost their ranks. Lux had a feeling that the little dwarves, who had accepted him as one of their party members, were nearing the apostle rank. Soon, they will be leaving this place behind, Lux thought with a sigh as he gazed at the dwarves who were looking at him with happy expressions, with the exception of Matty, who was looking at him with envy and jealousy. "I feel sorry for this henpecked shrimp." Lux chuckled internally as he flashed a smug smile to Matty, which made the latter give him the middle finger. "How did the fight against the berserk horned rabbit end?" Lux asked. "It took us 15 minutes to defeat it," Colette reported. "It was very fast and very strong. According to the information we gathered, the carbuncle is always accompanied by 2 of them. This is the reason we decided to familiarize ourselves with its attack patterns." "That is a very good plan," Lux nodded in agreement. Knowing the fight patterns of the monsters you would be fighting against would greatly increase the probability of defeating them. This was especially true for strong monsters like the carbuncle, which was the Aspiration Plains alpha monster. "You better pay attention when we fight the berserk horned rabbit later," Matty snorted. "That monster is a meter tall and packs a punch. You don't want its horn stuck into your butt, right, big brother?" Maddie's words didn't hide his wish for Lux to suffer from a butt attack from the rank 2 monster who was known for its speed and short temper. You should worry about yourself, Lux replied. A mere berserk-horn rabbit is no match against me. I even fought against an alpha monster. Alone, Colette asked as she looked at Lux with sparkling eyes. Lux shook his head. No, it was 14 against 1. Colette, Maddie, and the rest of the Golden Slayers party looked at Lux with a weird expression on their faces. While the adorable blonde-haired Colette didn't say anything, Maddie used this opportunity to bring Lux down a peg. What? 14 against 1? Maddie asked with an amused expression on his face. Aren't you ashamed, big brother? Even the dwarf parties here in the beginner's zone only fight alpha beasts with up to 7 members. You, on the other hand, fought them with twice the number? That's not something to be proud of. Colette and Helen, the 2 girls of the party, giggled as they looked at Lux's proud expression. What Maddie said was true, and there was no sense of achievement in fighting an alpha beast with twice the number of regular party members. Although there was nothing fundamentally wrong with this strategy, many dwarves looked down on this practice because they would not feel any satisfaction from this. They preferred to fight alpha monsters with a single party in order to prove that party's overall strength. Lux just shrugged Maddie's words because for him, fighting a monster one-on-one or fighting in a group was not a big deal. Since he was a necromancer, it would be a great waste if he didn't bring his skeletons to fight alongside him. Where is Robin? Lux asked. After scanning his party mates, he found out that the boy, whom the riders of Noria had been very keen to rescue, wasn't around. Robin is handling some family matters and will be away for some time, Colette replied. He said that he will return once he is able to and told us not to wait for him. Robin comes and goes as he pleases, Helen commented as she walked towards Lux. He's a free-spirited boy and is only a temporary member of our party. Lux nodded his head in understanding. Until now, he had been wondering about Robin's real identity. For the latter to be treated so highly by the riders of Noria, that could only mean that the dwarf boy was not an ordinary person. Let's go, big brother. Colette smiled as she held on to Lux's right arm and dragged him towards the gate. We'll hunt for the carbuncle and try to defeat it. I'm sure that if all of us work together, we will emerge victorious. Oh, before I forget, do you want to marry my big sister? I talked to my father about it when I returned, and he said that he would love to meet you and go fishing with you. The corner of Lux's lips twitched when he heard Colette's innocent words. Deep inside, he knew that Colette's father didn't want to go fishing with him. The half-elf had a feeling that if he really were to meet Colette's father, whichever fishing area it was, the latter would definitely feed him to the fishes if he ever played along with Colette's wishes and asked Colette's sister for her hand in marriage. Colette, why are you so intent on making me your big sister's fiancé? Lux asked as they passed through the gate. The little blonde dwarf was humming a tune before she turned her head to look up at Lux. Isn't it obvious? I want Big Brother to be part of my family. That is what is bothering me. Why you want me to be part of your family? Colette gave Lux a mischievous smile before replying to his question. Because Big Sister once told me that she didn't plan on getting married, Colette answered. When I pressed her for answers, she said that there was no dwarf that had caught her attention. Since no dwarves can satisfy her, I thought that you might be able to do that. After all, Big Brother is not a dwarf, right? Lux didn't know if he should laugh or cry at Colette's innocent words. He found the reasoning silly, but coming from Colette, he thought that it was very likely of her to come up with such a conclusion. I'm sure that your sister just said that she didn't plan to marry in order to pursue her goals here in Elysium. Lux thought as he walked hand in hand with Colette, who had started to hum a song. For the little girl, her sister was her idol. Her sister was one of the prodigies of their country, and she was simply perfect. Many noble families in Solais and Elysium had tried to play matchmaker in order to form a strong connection with her, but all of them were politely rejected by her. Aina, who was Colette's older sister, had a grand goal in life, and, for that to happen, she had to expand her influence in Elysium to simultaneously build the foundation of her dream. Colette was not aware of her sister's circumstance, so she was doing her best to play matchmaker for Lux and Aina. After being rescued by Lux in the kobold's nest, her respect and admiration for the half-elf had grown in leaps and bounds. Colette wasn't aware that the more she talked about Lux to the members of her family, the more her father wished that he could go to the beginner zone and hack Lux to pieces. Fortunately, he couldn't do that because of the rules that bound the world of Elysium. As the dwarves and the half-elf headed towards the center of the aspiration plains, a purple-skinned menace with red eyes and a red jewel on its head opened its eyes. It let out a soft cry, and 4 berserk horned rabbits ran to its side. It was now time for it to hunt, and everyone in the aspiration plains was its prey, ready for the taking. As they traveled towards their destination, Lux pondered which among the 4 options that he obtained from his bonus reward was the most ideal choice. He must choose the one that would give him the most benefits. Hell Horse, Golden Token of Guelevin, Monster Egg, Teleport Scroll, 4 PCS. In truth, if he wanted an immediate upgrade, the Hell Horse was the most ideal option. Not only would it allow Diablo's Skeleton Rider class to show its full potential, the mount would also grow along with its rider. For example, if someday Diablo became a high ranker, the Hell Horse would also become a high ranker. Lux would automatically have 2 powerful creatures under his command. The Golden Token of Guelevin might have useful functions, but it was only effective within the Dwarven Kingdom. The egg was either a hit or miss. Lux might gain a decent monster or an extremely good monster after hatching. Unfortunately, the half-elf didn't trust his luck too much, and he wasn't confident enough to choose the egg and hatch it. As for the teleport scroll, Lux believed that it would be extremely useful in the future after he left the beginner's village. It could be used as a life-saving item if he had to escape from a dangerous situation. The teleport scroll had different functions depending on the situation, which made it a very valuable item to possess. Fortunately, choosing a reward doesn't have a time limit, Lux thought. For the time being, I'll keep it on hold and decide when something unexpected happens. I don't need to hurry. Lux knew that his current strength was enough to deal with anything in the Leaf Village, as long as he didn't do anything stupid like challenge the field boss, which was the Forest Wolf King. The half-elf glanced at the dwarves, who were seated with him in a horse wagon, which they had rented back at the village. In the front, Maddie was tasked to be the coachman, while the rest were assigned to scan the surroundings. The children were being extra alert because of what happened with the kobolds during their escort mission. All of them were holding their weapons at the ready, prepared to react instantly at the first sign of danger. Even Helen, the group's cleric, had a serious expression on her face as she observed her surroundings with a critical eye. When Lux saw that, it made him smile. Most of the time, he would almost forget that they were just children because of how strong-willed they were. 2 berserk horned rabbits at 8 o'clock, Colette shouted. Everyone immediately looked in the direction where the little blonde dwarf was pointing. 2 red rabbits that were a meter tall were running in their direction. They were rank 2 monsters that were known for their speed and their aggressive attitude towards those that had entered their territory. Battle formation, Colette shouted as she jumped off the horse wagon, holding the mace in her hands. Maddie stood beside her, while Andy, Axel, and Helen were in the rear. Colette's profession was a paladin. She was a hybrid offensive warrior that excelled in close combat, could use magic, and tank enemies if needed be. As the leader of the group, she was always on the front line alongside Maddie, who was a pure offensive fighter. Lux also stood beside the 2 children as he raised his hand and summoned Diablo and Ishtar. It had been a while since he had fought side by side with his friends, so he was wondering how much they had improved during the time they weren't together. I'll handle one of the berserk horned rabbit, Lux said. The rest of you deal with the other one. Okay, big brother. Colette agreed as she braced herself to collide with the horned rabbit whose horn was poised to strike her. The sound of metal hitting a hard object reverberated in the surroundings as Colette and the horned rabbit clashed. The little girl's feet skidded across the ground by a meter, but her stance didn't break as she stopped the berserk horned rabbit's charge. Maddie took this opportunity to deliver 2 powerful slashes to the horned rabbit's right leg, making it cry out in pain. Fire bullet. Water bullet. Andy and Axel fired their respective spells, which landed on the berserk horned rabbit's body, pushing it back. Diablo, on the other hand, smashed his shield against the berserk horned rabbit's head, stunning it before delivering a heavy slash on the side of its body. Ishtar, on the other hand, used siege stance and fired a piercing arrow into the berserked horned rabbit's leg, crippling it. Diablo used this opportunity to strike the monster's other foot, preventing it from running away. The horned rabbit's main weapons were its powerful legs, as well as the horn on its head, both which were often used to attack its enemies with a charging attack. As long as its legs were immobilized, it would effectively lose more than 70% of its combat abilities. Diablo was no longer ignorant of the ways of battle after he had fought in the undead outbreak, then against the kobolds, the mosquitoes, and the dwarf mage, which they had recently defeated. As a named creature, its intelligence was quite high. With each battle it fought, its tactical ability grew more and more. Diablo and Ishtar worked together in order to kill the incapacitated monster, which they did with relative ease. Lux didn't do anything and simply stood still while he observed the battle of his friends. Maddie had also attacked the legs of the berserked horned rabbit after the initial clash, with practiced movements. Colette, on the other hand, used her mace to give the horned rabbit an uppercut, which made Lux subconsciously massage his jaw due to the imaginary secondhand pain that he had felt. Fire Lance, Water Lance, Andy's and Axel's attacks pierced the monster's chest, making it screech in pain and frustration. With just a glance, Lux could see that the kids were also just a few points away from reaching the apostle rank. Their current performance reflected this. So, this is why you want to fight Carbuncle, Lux thought. You guys are about to graduate, and are planning to fight against the alpha monsters of the beginner's village as proof of your strength and courage. Lux felt a little sad at the knowledge that his friends would be leaving Leaf Village soon. The half-elf guessed that due to the kobold incident, the parents of his friends decided to give them beast cores in order to help them break through to the apostle rank. If I remember correctly, Colette's big sister is also an apostle, Lux mused. Maybe Colette's parents want her to babysit her little sister and keep her safe. Although he felt a little sad knowing that the children were preparing for their graduation in the beginner's village, he was also very happy for them. A few minutes later, the two berserked rabbits were dead, and the Golden Slayer's party rejoiced for their easy win. Big brother, how did Mr. Diablo become so strong? Colette asked as she patted one of Diablo's legs, which was covered with black armor. Diablo must have been amused by the little girl who was patting him all over, so he patted her head and even playfully ruffled Colette's hair, which made her giggle. This is the first time I've seen this skeleton, Maddie said as he pointed at Ishtar, who was looking at Colette's and Diablo's interaction with a curious gaze. Is he your new summon, Lux? Yes, Lux replied. Her name is Ishtar, and she is a skeleton hunter. Skeleton hunter? First time I've heard of it. Maddie crossed his arms over his chest as he pondered. I only know about skeleton archers. This skeleton hunter doesn't ring a bell. Andy and Axel used their own enchanted beast rings to store the corpse of the two monsters, which they would bring back to Leaf Village to sell after they finished their goal in coming to the Aspiration Plains. You can think of her as a more powerful version of a skeleton archer, Lux explained. He was about to say more when he suddenly heard a screech coming from behind them. A 2-meter-tall, purple monster with a red jewel on its forehead charged in their direction. Lux's expression turned grim when he saw that the monster wasn't alone. Running alongside, it were 4 berserked horned rabbit, whose red eyes glowed with fury. Everyone brace yourselves, Colette shouted as she stood in front of her party members. That is a mutated carbuncle. It's stronger than the normal carbuncle, and its strength is equivalent to a peak rank 3 alpha monster. Lux frowned because this was the first time he heard the term mutated, and it made him wonder if there was something special about this monster that was now headed in their direction. The red jewel on the mutated carbuncle's head glowed brightly, signifying its increase in movement speed as well as the increase in speed of the berserked horned rabbits with it. Lux already knew that the carbuncle was more of a support-type monster, rather than an offensive one. Just like the berserked horned rabbits, the carbuncle was only supposed to be a meter tall. However, the one that they were facing right now was at least 2 meters tall, which is why Colette called it a mutated monster. Lux didn't have time to open the Elysium Compendium and check what that mutated meant but he didn't have to be a genius to understand that it was a stronger version of the original monster. I just hope that it is still a support-focused monster. Lux was unable to finish his thought because the carbuncle opened its mouth and released a barrage of sparkling golden diamonds, all of which were the size of fingernails. Skeleton fighters. Lux summoned his skeletons, which stood in front of the dwarves and used their shields to block the unexpected magical attack from the mutated alpha beast. When the dazzling attack receded, a third of the skeletal fighter's health was lost, which made Lux's face turn serious. However, before he could even think of a way to counter the carbuncle's offensive, the 4 berserk-horned rabbits had already closed the distance and rammed their horns on the skeleton fighter's shields, which sent them flying away. Fortunately, although Colette and the others were young, they were not helpless little kids. After the skeleton fighters were blown away, Colette, Maddie, Diablo, and Ishtar all used their strongest skills to attack the legs of the berserk-horned rabbits in order to lower their mobility. The attacks successfully connected, which gave them the ideal results they were aiming for, but before any of them could celebrate, the red jewel on the carbuncle's forehead glowed once again. A green light enveloped the berserk-horned rabbits, and the injuries that they had received got healed, allowing them to evade the follow-up attacks of Colette and the others. Lux summoned his skeleton grand archers in order to deal ranged damage to the carbuncle, who stood behind all of his minions. The alpha beast deftly evaded the rain of arrows that was aimed at it with its incredible speed. No matter what kind of attack was fired at it, the carbuncle dodged it without fail, which made things difficult for Lux and the others. There were times when they were able to seriously injure the berserk-horned rabbits, but because of the carbuncle's healing abilities, the injuries the monsters received recovered at a rapid pace. "This is not going anywhere, big brother," Colette said as she smashed her mace on the head of the berserk-horned rabbit that had attacked Maddie, who stood beside her. "We need to deal with the mutated carbuncle first." "Got it. Diablo Ishtar, let's deal with that alpha beast first," Lux ordered before activating his battle cry, which raised the physical and magical attacks of his allies. He then ordered his skeleton fighters and skeleton grand archers to assist Colette and the others in dealing with the alpha beast minions. The skeleton fighters, as well as the skeleton archers, were at the peak of rank 1 monsters. The berserk-horned rabbits might be stronger than them, but the gap between the two parties wasn't that wide. The dwarves were surprised when they realized how strong Lux's summoned skeletons were. It hadn't been long since they fought against the Dark Draugr in the Bronze Crypt and came out victorious. Because of that, they thought that if they added Lux and Diablo to their party, they would be able to fight the carbuncle if all of them worked together. Never in their wildest dreams did they think that one of Lux's skeleton fighters were just as strong as them. Unbelievable, Colette thought. Big brother is really amazing. Maddie, who was fighting alongside Colette, had also noticed the strength of the skeletons fighting by his side and was dumbfounded. Just how did he get this strong in such a short period of time? Maddie couldn't believe what he was seeing. Although he knew that Lux had been rewarded with several beast cores by their families, it wasn't enough to create this many powerful summons at the get-go. Without the help of the carbuncle, the berserk-horned rabbits were slowly losing their ground in the head-on confrontation. "I feel more powerful," Axel gasped when the effects of the battle cry affected him. Axel nodded as he fired spell after spell at the berserk-horned rabbit that was being pinned down by Lux's skeleton fighters. "We can win this," Helen chanted as she cast her own support spells to help her teammates become stronger. The battle was quite intense, with neither side wanting to back down. The mutated carbuncle was fighting a 3-against-1 battle, while his minions were fighting 4 against 16. Seeing that its minions' health had already fallen past 50%, the carbuncle decided to use its healing ability to restore their health. However, Lux and Diablo were waiting for this exact moment. Diablo pointed his sword at the mutated carbuncle and activated his special skill duel, EX, which forced his enemies to exchange one blow with him. It was similar to a taunting skill, but the difference between the two skills was that the taunt skill could be resisted, while the duel EX couldn't. With an effective range of 300 meters, Diablo could practically taunt anything that he had set his eyes on. Although the skill had a 1-minute cooldown, it was still a very useful ability to break the enemy's momentum. After executing the skill, the mutated carbuncle faced Diablo and screeched. Its healing skill was interrupted and was now forced to charge in the named creature's direction. Diablo, who was wearing his black knight armor, stood steadily in order to clash with the alpha beast that it had angered. Ishtar had taken a siege stance and fired a piercing arrow, which flew towards the chest of the carbuncle, making it howl in pain. Lux extended his hand and shouted, "Mana drain," in order to deplete the alpha beast's mana reserves. The half-elf knew that this was going to become a battle of attrition, so he prioritized draining the carbuncle's mana to stop it from being able to cast spells that would help its minions recover from the one-sided beating that they were currently suffering from. The sword in Diablo's hand glowed briefly as he activated his skill, Heavy Slash. His sword met the mutated carbuncle's swiping attack. The sound of metal hitting metal spread throughout the surroundings. Diablo's feet skidded against the ground, while the mutated carbuncle took 2 steps back after their collision. Another arrow flew through the air and pierced Carbuncle's chest, making it shriek in pain. Ishtar was a very opportunistic hunter and timed her attack at the right moment to deal significant damage to the alpha beast. Lux also fired a dark arrow at the mutated carbuncle, hoping to blind it, but it failed. It was at that moment when one of the berserk horned rabbits let out a blood-curdling screech before collapsing on the ground dead. The alpha beast was immediately alarmed because it had completely forgotten about its minion since it was entangled by Lux and his 2 named creatures. Just as it was about to cast its healing magic on the survivors, Diablo smashed his shield against the alpha beast's face, interrupting its healing magic for the second time. Lux understood that the only reason why they could overpower the mutated monster was because of the carbuncle originally being only a support-type monster. Among the alpha beasts in the beginner's village, it was the weakest. To deal with it, everyone just had to kill its minions first before encircling it and hacking it to death. This was the typical strategy used when fighting against the carbuncle, which had been proven effective over time. Because it was unable to heal its allies due to Diablo's interference, the remaining berserk horned rabbits fell one by one. Just as everyone was about to encircle the mutated alpha monster, it leapt high into the air in an attempt to run away. Diablo also used his own leap skill, following its enemy into the air, while Ishtar released another piercing arrow. Although the sound of the whistling wind reached the mutated carbuncle's ears, the arrow was almost impossible to avoid while in air. Unable to evade, the arrow pierced its chest, breaking its stance. Diablo's heavy slash immediately followed after the arrow had struck true, smashing its back and sending it towards the ground. The dwarves and the skeletons didn't miss this opportunity and ran towards the fallen alpha beast. However, Lux's shout made them all take a defensive stance as the carbuncle once again unleashed another diamond storm as its last resort. Just like before, the skeletal fighters stood in front of the dwarves and shielded them from the unique attack of the mutated beast. When the attack ended, the skeleton fighters' bodies shattered because their health was already low after fighting against the berserk horned rabbits. However, this wasn't a big issue. "Arise!" Lux ordered, and his skeleton fighters rose once again to beat the crap out of the oversized rabbit that had killed them just a moment ago. The pitiful alpha monster then found itself surrounded on all sides with nowhere to go. Diablo and Ishtar had already dealt significant damage to its legs. However, its ability to heal itself was getting annoying. To deal with this, Lux used mana drain every time the skill's cooldown ended. After a grueling 30 minutes, the mutated alpha monster finally fell, transforming into particles of light. It left several items on the ground, including an egg that was 2 feet tall, which made Colette jump up and down due to happiness. Colette and the other dwarves flocked to the items that were dropped by the mutated carbuncle. The monster egg stood at the center of it all, catching everyone's attention. "This egg is without a doubt a carbuncle's egg," Colette said with sparkling eyes. She then began to gently touch the egg as if it was a priceless treasure that she had seen for the very first time. Helen also touched the egg, just like Colette. This was the first time she had seen a monster drop an egg, so she was quite surprised when she saw it. Since the two girls were busy touching the egg all over, Maddie and the others busied themselves with organizing the rest of the loot that they had acquired. One of them was a red jewel that was as big as Lux's hand. This jewel, which could be found on the carbuncle's forehead, was very precious, and many merchants were willing to buy it at a very high price. The second item was the mutated carbuncle's purple fur. This was another top-tier item that could be used as a carpet, a blanket, and even clothes which were perfect to wear in places with cold weather. The third item was the monster's meat, which also fetched a decent price in the market. Since rabbit meat is quite popular in Leaf Village, the meat of this alpha beast was considered to be a rare delicacy. Last, but not the least, was the mutated carbuncle's beast core. It was the size of a bowling ball and had a bright purple color. Although it was a rank 3 beast core, it was bigger than a regular one, which meant that the number of skill or stat points that could be gained from it would not be less than 50. "Nice haul," Lux said as he crossed his arms on his chest. "Congratulations for beating your first alpha beast." The dwarves who were in Cloud 9 were broken out of their daze after they heard Lux's words. All of them stopped what they were doing and looked in his direction as if they had completely forgotten about him. It was at that moment when they remembered that the one who played a major role in subjugating the mutated carbuncle was none other than the half-elf in front of them. If Lux wasn't there, all of them might have been seriously injured. As for the worst-case scenario, they might have all died fighting the mutated monster that came out of nowhere. "Be big brother. These spoils of war should belong to you," Colette stuttered while looking at Lux with teary eyes. Her hands were still latched onto the egg like a koala hugging a tree, which made the red-headed teenager laugh due to how adorable she looked. "Don't worry. All the loot for this hunt is for you guys," Lux replied. "As you can see, with my current strength, it will not be a problem for me to hunt another carbuncle. If you still find this unfair, then just think of it as an older brother giving gifts to his little brothers and sisters. It's fine that way, right?" Colette immediately let go of the monster egg and ran towards Lux, jumping into his arms. "Big brother, you are the best," Colette shouted happily as Lux spun her round and round. After spinning the little girl a few times, Lux finally set her back down on the ground. Colette then glanced at the egg, then back at Lux before voicing her thoughts. "Big brother, you can take the egg," Colette said. "The eggs of alpha beasts are very rare, especially mutated ones. Even my sister didn't get one when she was in the beginner's village." Lux shook his head firmly. "No, I don't need it. However, promise me that you will raise that carbuncle with love and care. Since it is a support-type monster, it will help you and Helen heal your party members when things get rough. I'll be able to have more peace of mind knowing that you guys have an extra healer supporting you in your adventures. So, just take the egg and the other items." "Big brother, are you sure you really don't want it?" Colette asked with a serious expression on her face. "I'm sure. Just keep everything for yourselves." Lux smiled as he glanced at the rewards that he had obtained from killing the mutated carbuncle in his soul book. Special quests. Encounter with a mutated monster. Mission rating B. Status completed. Quest objective. Kill the mutated carbuncle. Rewards. 50 free stat points. 50 skill points. 50 body constitution points. Mutated carbuncle's jewel. Mutated carbuncle's meat. Mutated carbuncle's fur. Rank 3 Alpha Beast Core. Bonus reward. Alpha Monster Egg. Hatching the egg will give you a random baby monster that is equivalent or higher than an alpha monster that could be found in the entirety of the territory of Noria. You can hatch this egg with the help of a monster breeder. The reason why Lux didn't want to fight the children with the distribution of the loot was due to the fact that he had already acquired a set of items on his own. Since that was the case, asking for more would be too greedy of him. Besides, he really liked Colette and the others. He thought that it would be best to just let the kids enjoy their first attempt at challenging an alpha monster as a team. Since the egg wasn't an item that could be stored inside the enchanted beast ring, Lux and the others carefully placed it inside the carriage. Maddie was assigned to put the egg on his lap to ensure that the bumps on the road wouldn't break it. Everyone was in a good mood as they returned to Leaf Village. The distribution of the loots was done as follows. Colette would take the monster egg because she was the leader of the group. The boys decided to give the monster fur to Helen as compensation. Maddie, Andy, and Axel, on the other hand, would sell the carbuncle's jewel and share the profits that they would gain from it. Since Lux didn't get anything, Colette decided to scribble something on a piece of paper and handed it to Lux. The half-elf couldn't help but chuckle after reading its contents, which made Colette's face turn beet red due to embarrassment. One showed a massage ticket. That was what was written on the piece of paper that Colette gave Lux, which made Maddie extremely envious. If possible, he would give Lux a share of the gold coins they would receive for selling the carbuncle's jewel in exchange for the shoulder massage ticket in his hand. Naturally, he couldn't voice this out loud, so he had no choice but to glare at the half-elf who acquired a very precious ticket that he would fight to get. As soon as their merry little band entered Leaf Village, Lux noticed Boreas, as well as the middle-aged dwarf, Nevriel, who was also Robin's caretaker, standing by one of the sides of the gate. There were other goat riders beside them, which made Lux wonder if they were planning to go on a mission somewhere. However, before their carriage could drive past them, Boreas called out to Lux. "Lux von Kaiser, do you have some time today?" Boreas asked. "There is something very important that we need to talk about. Why don't you follow me to the barracks for now?" Lux frowned, but still nodded his head. Although he didn't know why Boreas and Nevriel were waiting for him at the gates of the village, he could tell that the matter they wanted to discuss was a serious one. Lux and the important people in Leaf Village sat in a conference room. Boreas had called for all of them because the matter he was going to discuss was about the recent incident that happened in the Figaro Gardens. "My commander, Lord Thoram, took the remains of the abomination to the capital and had an audience with His Majesty," Boreas said with a serious expression on his face. "The mages there examined the corpse and found some highly confidential information that I will share with all of you right now. Make no mistake, this information mustn't be revealed to anyone. The only reason why I've been given permission to mention this to everyone present is because this new organization is currently performing their experiments in the villages near the borders of the kingdom. After His Majesty gave the order, a massive operation was set in motion, and various border strongholds managed to capture 4 more members of the organization in the other dwarf villages. These places also encountered an unusual increase of a specific type of monster in their area. Unfortunately, in 2 of those places, the monster was born successfully, which made subjugation very difficult. Many lives were lost, so His Majesty was forced to send initiates to handle the situation. After a gruesome battle, those 2 abominations were slain. However, after examining all of their bodies, the mages discovered that these monsters had the power to evolve. The faces of the elders of Leaf Village immediately went pale when they heard the word evolve. Certain monsters had this particular ability, so it was not that surprising. However, creatures that had the strength of field bosses after being born and still had the power to evolve was bad news for everyone. If left undiscovered, they could step into a high rank, which was strong enough to wipe out entire villages and towns, whose defenders didn't have the strength to defeat it. Lux von Kaiser, Lord Thoram, and the other commanders of the border guards are very grateful for your contribution in this matter. Boreas gave Lux a brief bow before passing him a wooden box. His Majesty wanted to hold a ceremony for you to become an honorary knight of our kingdom, but his advisors advised against it. Although the kingdom of Guelevin does trade with other races, their presence in our kingdom is very rare. Usually less than 10 people from the other nations are allowed entry to our borders. The advisors said that if you were knighted publicly, it might cause unrest for the people and would in turn create unnecessary trouble in the future. This was why, instead of His Majesty, I have come to present to you the medal that bestows upon you the rank of an honorary knight within our kingdom. Although you are conferred this title, you will not be awarded with any lands. However, you will receive discounts in any shops or for any services that this nation provides. Please accept His Majesty's well wishes and know that you are now known to him and he regards you in high esteem." Lux opened the wooden box and saw a golden medal with the insignia of a war axe. It was carved with a very intricate design, which made the half-elf quite happy. It was because as soon as he received the Medal of Knighthood, he received a series of notifications telling him that he had acquired the Honorary Knight title. Title: Honorary Knight. You have performed an outstanding service for the Kingdom of Guelvin, and His Majesty, King Maximilian von Guelvin, hereby recognizes you as an Honorary Knight. Grant additional 100 reputation points to the Kingdom of Guelvin. You will receive a 10% increase in attack and defense if you are fighting within the Kingdom of Guelvin. Very nice, Lux thought. However, that was the only beginning. After receiving the medal, the reputation function in his soul book activated. Lux checked the effect of the reputation points he had gained and was quite happy with the outcome. Kingdom of Guelvin reputation points, 200. Relationship status, good. You will get up to a 20% discount for all services within the kingdom. The law-abiding dwarves in the kingdom will not find any trouble for you. Riders of Noria reputation points, 500. Relationship status, friendly. Gives you the privilege to enter the stronghold of Noria and explore the services available there. You will get up to a 20% discount on all services inside the stronghold. You will be able to gain their assistance if you wish for it. Every time you ask for their help, your reputation points will be decreased by 500 points. Leaf Village reputation points, 2,000. Relationship status, benefactor. As someone who had saved the entire village from a catastrophe, you will be treated politely by all of its residents. Certain services that are not available to foreigners will be open to you. You will get up to a 50% discount on all services inside Leaf Village. You will be able to ask for the help of the city guards if you wish for it. Each time you use this service, 250 reputation points will be deducted. Points will not be deducted when you ask for their help, as long as the task will benefit Leaf Village as a whole. Interesting, Lux thought. I will be able to ask for their assistance if need be. I never thought that reputation worked like this. Although the price for asking for the assistance from the stronghold of Noria would immediately bring his reputation points to 0, Lux thought that it was a good trade-off since he would have their full assistance. The stronghold had hundreds of warriors, whose ranks ranged from Grade D up to Grade A disciples. It was the strongest force within the territory of Noria, and Lux felt having them as a backup was a worthwhile thing. Aside from Medal of Knighthood, you will be given other rewards, Boreas continued. Sir Nevriel said that you are looking for weapons and armor. According to the information that we have on you, your profession is a necromancer. Do you perhaps plan to arm your minions with these weapons? Lux had a dumbfounded look on his face as he gave Boreas the "how did you know about that?" gaze, which made the rider captain chuckle. It's not that hard to guess, Boreas explained. You already have good weapons and armor, so I'm guessing that the weapons and armor that you requested from us will be equipped by your skeletons. Worry not. Our stronghold will allow you to receive 15 sets of weapons and armor, which are in the same level as the standard equipment for Riders of Noria. Just go to the stronghold and collect the things you need. Thank you very much, Lux replied excitedly. He would initially get a headache whenever he thought about how he would even arm his ordinary summons with stronger gear. Now that they would receive the equipment from the stronghold of Noria, this problem was solved for the time being. Nevriel, who had kept silent for the duration of Boreas' speech, suddenly cleared his throat in order to catch Lux's attention. His Majesty also passed a decree to me before we came here to see you, Nevriel said. He said that if you have something you want, as long as it doesn't go past the limit of his generosity, he will bestow it upon you. So, is there something that you want as a reward for your services to the kingdom? Lux's smile widened after hearing Nevriel's words. He knew that this was a good opportunity, so he decided to see if he could get the thing he needed most right now. If it's not too much of a bother, can His Majesty give me a hell horse? Lux asked. Nevriel frowned. A hell horse? What do you plan to do with one? They are malevolent beasts, and it is very hard to tame one. Although there are several of them roaming near the borders of the kingdom, we mostly leave them alone because acquiring one is more trouble than they're worth. I want one, Lux replied. This is the reward that I want His Majesty to bestow upon me. Nevriel and Boreas glanced at each other before shifting their attention back to Lux. "I'll pass your message to His Majesty," Nevriel said after pondering for a moment. "For what I can tell, you plan to get a mount that has an evil personality. Although we don't have a hell horse in our possession, we do have something similar called Nightmare. If you are interested, I'll ask His Majesty to bestow this beast to you. However, if it causes any trouble to the kingdom, you will take responsibility for its actions. Do you understand?" Lux nodded his head in understanding. After getting Nevriel's promise, the half-elf felt like all the effort he put into investigating the abnormality in the Figaro Garden